This dark-haired kid stands right outside the mansion, claps his hands to spark a flame, and then blasts a massive fireball straight ahead. The kid blasts a massive fireball from his hands, and it slams right into the center of the target. While he's grabbing a drink of water, an old lady walks over and tells him he whips around to look at the older lady in total shock, gets all flustered and tells her she's totally overreacting, but she just looks at him confused and asks what. The old lady says his magic is already insane and super accurate, and he hasn't even gotten his special gift yet. The kid keeps playing those words over in his head. Basically, when you turn 15, the goddess grants you a unique superpower. There are all kinds of gifts out there, but the combat ones are definitely. Out of nowhere, a massive light flashes right behind him as a beam of energy slams into the dirt, revealing the shadow of a mysterious guy standing right in the middle of it. The boy and the old lady shield their faces as a massive gust of wind kicks up dust. But when he looks up, he realizes it's actually lightning magic. Suddenly, his big brother pops up right behind him looking totally lost, and when the kid turns around, he realizes it's Keith. He walks up to his little brother Alma and asks if he's still grinding through his training. An old lady walks up to Keith and calls him the biggest genius his family has ever seen, saying everyone's noticed his insane lightning magic, and even the guards think he's a total legend. Elma walks right up to Keith, puts her hand over her heart, and tells him she's actually super proud of how he's using his powers like a total pro. Keith shoots Alma a look like he's seriously annoyed. The guy asks to help Keith just so they can chat on the way, and Keith rubs his head like he's about to say something. He says his dad actually took some time to pull Alma aside for a talk. Elma's eyes go wide as she stares in total shock. Alma headed inside, and a servant told him to grab a seat at the table where his dad was already waiting. Alma walks into the dining room and sits down at a table piled high with food, while his dad is already at the other end digging in. He tells her that in just one more day, Alma is finally gonna get her gift. The dude just nods and goes right back to stuffing his face. The guy swirls his wine glass, staring at it like he's got a secret plan, and then he just starts laughing. He says he tried to invite Koreha and Kita to the ceremony, but they're way too busy to make it, and Alma totally gets why they can't show up. Alma admits he's just not ready for this gift yet, and he's stressing that it won't even be useful for the guy's family. The guy wipes his mouth with a napkin and says he's about to tell them exactly what he thinks. He's really banking on Alma being the one to inherit his sage legacy. Alma's face turned bright red from pure hype, and he totally knew these gifts were handed down through the family. His dad's a sage and his mom's a magician, so in a family like this, the kids usually end up being wizards. Turns out the oldest brother Korecha scored the fire mage gift, while the second son Keith walked away with lightning mage powers. They both scored insane elemental powers and officially became wizards. But their powers were actually way better than the sage's gift. Sages are basically magic gods who can spam any spell instantly, making it the most broken ability a wizard can have. Alma thinks having 2 generations of sages would make the family legendary, and the man says he's got huge hopes for the kid since he's been watching him grow up and knows he'll be a massive help no matter what power he gets. Alma's jaw drops when her dad tells her he finally cleared his schedule and is actually coming to the ceremony. His face turned bright red as he started to cry, and while he wiped his eyes, he realized he'd never been this happy in his entire life. Alma rushed back to his room to change, and then headed straight to the ceremony, deciding that even if he didn't get the sage's power, he'd still give it his all no matter how weak his gift turned out to be. The kid steps into a massive hall filled with a sea of hooded figures, where an old man with a staff announces that Alma Fellow's gift is finally about to be revealed. This kid was ready to go all out to make his powers pay off, doing it all for his dad and his friend's family. The old guy starts talking about the gift. The kid shuts his eyes and blushes like crazy. The old man can't even find the words to describe it. The boy just keeps waiting there He's left wondering what this all means, while Alma stares at the guy in total shock. The whole room starts buzzing with rumors as Alma's dad demands to know why the announcement is taking forever. And when he asks the priest what power his son actually got, the priest drops a "eeeeee." The dad just stares at his son in total shock, asking what's even going on, while the kid keeps replaying the news that he's powerless, his eyes going wide as he wonders how. The whole crowd started freaking out because nobody had ever seen someone born without a gift before. They couldn't believe the youngest son of a legendary sage was actually powerless. Alma just stood there. Alma's dad rushes up to the priest and demands to know what's going on. He's shouting that this has to be some kind of huge mistake. Alma is desperate to make her dad proud, and he realizes he's got to step up his game big time. Alma remembers his dad's big dreams for him to inherit that sage power, and since he doesn't have it, he knows he's got to grind way harder to prove himself. The kid tries to call his dad, remembering how he promised that no matter what power he got, he'd still be a huge help to the family. The man spins around and asks how Alma has the nerve to call him father, leaving the guy standing there in total shock. The guy asks if he seriously doesn't get the mess he's in, while Alma tries to prove he's still useful even without a special power. The dad swings his hand and blasts his son with a magic spell that shuts him right up. An attack slams down right in front of Alma, leaving a huge mark on the ground right by his feet. The guy says there's a massive gap between having a gift and being powerless, and he asks if the kid seriously can't hear everyone in the room whispering that his family bloodline is the problem. The guy yells that Alma's name is a total disgrace to their house, while everyone in the back starts trash-talking him for being nothing but a spoiled rich kid. The guy reaches out and tells him he's got no use for a loser who couldn't even bring back that family's gift. This guy straight up kicks Elma out of the family. Once the ceremony wraps up, our guy hits up the nearest tavern to grab a cold drink. He keeps chugging down drinks while everyone behind his back whispers about how his son didn't get the gift. Alma noticed the rumors were spreading like crazy. Then he ordered another drink that cost him 700 gold coins. He'd just pocketed 50,000 gold. Alma stands up and realizes that drinking her problems away isn't going to fix this mess. Everyone at the next table whipped around to stare right at him. I was honestly wondering how he'd even survive, but just as he tried to leave the tavern, some guy at the next table tripped him and he went crashing down. The visitors just laughed while Alma tried to stand up, but he couldn't do it and just collapsed onto his back, realizing he was totally on his own now. In this entire world, he's got absolutely nobody left to help him out. Alma broke down crying, feeling like a total ghost without his powers or a home, and he was sure things couldn't get any worse than this. He noticed something totally weird and started laughing, wondering if all this craziness was actually his special gift. Out of nowhere, a voice pops into his head telling him his special reincarnator gift is finally live. His eyes go wide as he scrambles up and grabs his head, wondering what that voice was. But then it speaks again and tells him he's inheriting all his memories and skills from... He's trying to figure out what's going on when a massive wave of pain hits him so hard he has to grit his teeth. And right then, a voice tells him he's officially inherited the status. Everyone in the shop starts cracking up when they see his face twisting in total agony, asking him what his deal is because the jerks who tripped him are sure he's just being a total drama queen. The kid jumps up and starts screaming his head off, but then a voice tells him he's inherited every magic type from attack and defense to space and spirit, and he starts sobbing in pure agony as... Alma dropped to his knees with a heavy sigh as it finally clicked why he didn't get his gift during the ceremony. Alma just stared down at his hands, totally stunned. It turns out he actually had a hidden power from the very start. This massive glowing energy suddenly exploded all around his body. Out of nowhere, someone shouted at him and asked what he was. Alma asks what's going on, so the man points at the bar and asks if this dude is the one who wrecked everyone, and that's when Alma realizes every single person in the place is knocked out cold. The kid realized it was all magic energy, and anyone without a shield got totally blasted by the massive power surge that hit when the reincarnation was passed down. The guy squared up for a fight and demanded to know what Alma was up to, asking him one more time who he actually was. He mistakes Alma for another bandit, and wonders how the guy even had the power to wreck all those customers. Alma tries to clear the air, but the guy just cuts him off and swings, yelling that talking is pointless as Alma quickly dodges the blow. Alma shuts his eyes, thinking this reincarnator is basically a massive gift from his very first life. He knew he only got one shot at being reborn, and his old memories and skills wouldn't even kick in until he turned 15. The guy reaches out and starts blasting magic. He unleashes a dark spell, Total Void. A pitch-black portal opens up and skeletons start crawling out. The man is so terrified he can't say. Alma remembers his first life was just for grinding power, so he bet it all on his second life and scored every single type of magic. The skeletons from the portal totally swamped him until he blacked out. But then he suddenly stood in the middle of a tavern, stared at his hands, and realized his second life was officially starting. The knight started grilling everyone at the tavern where the fight went down, and one witness spilled the beans that a kid from the fellow's family was actually there. This knight brings up how everyone in the tavern randomly blacked out last night, and when his buddy asks for the deets, he admits he's just as clueless as everyone else. One knight spots a sketchy alley and wonders if Alma's hiding there, but the other guy says it's a total waste of time to even look. The guy tells him that's a total lie and promises a massive reward if they catch Alma, so the knight checks the alley but finds absolutely nobody there. Alma used his magic to stick right to the wall, making sure the knights down below didn't spot him. Alma realizes the tavern mess has already been spotted, so he scales the wall and heads straight for the roof. Alma knows staying in the Empire as an exile is a total dead end, but he's got absolutely no clue where to go next. Alma remembers that the kingdom of Famaria is sitting right to the west of the Empire. This place was a total powerhouse, just as strong as the Aristotle Empire, and it's been around for over 200 years. If Alma's memory is right, his secret hideout. Alma was super hyped to see how much the world had actually changed while she was gone. Alma knows these roads are the perfect spot to run into trade wagons coming from the west. He heads down and starts walking, but since it's still super early, the whole street is basically a ghost town. Out of nowhere, the kid freezes when he sees a familiar shadow, and it's actually Keith standing right in his way. He says hey, and tells him he's been waiting a long time. Keith smirks and asks why the kid is starting brawls in a bar, thinking he learned absolutely nothing after getting kicked out for trash-talking the family name. Heath grins like a total maniac and tells them their dad is absolutely losing it. Alma shouts out, telling her big brother to wait up. He tries to explain that the whole thing was just a massive misunderstanding. He tells him that whatever went down at the bar was nothing but a huge accident. Alma promises that no matter what happens to their... Heath grits his teeth, absolutely fuming. He snaps that absolutely nothing has changed. Alma is totally lost and has no idea what his big brother is even saying. Heath says he couldn't. Alma's eyes pop wide open in total shock. Keith thrusts his hands forward to unleash his magic, finally admitting he's been a total jerk to Alma his entire life. Alma was totally lost as Keith unleashed a massive wave of magic, clearly wishing for his brother's total downfall. Alma realizes Keith is using ball lightning, and since his big brother is a high wizard, he knows this basic spell can be straight up deadly depending on who's casting it. A massive blast goes off, and everyone nearby covers their faces to shield themselves from the crazy shockwave and all that flying dust. One line out. Rule again. If the user provided a block, I should probably provide a block. Input. Keith watched, smiling, as the boy took a hard. He sees Alma dropped a stone slab right in front of him, totally blocking Keith's attack. Alma taps into her earth magic and throws up a solid stone shield. Keith asked his bro if he could actually use earth magic, and Alma revealed he'd been low-key practicing in secret this whole time. Alma knew that earth magic was the perfect way to shut down thunder, even if it sounds totally weird. Keith grits his teeth in rage, saying the guy has always been a jerk and he's finally hit his limit, while Alma just stares at him wondering what's going on. Keith clenches his hands and snaps that his little brother was always way ahead of him, saying he's totally done with being compared to anyone, and even though Alma tries to reach out, Heath admits that's why he felt so relieved when he found out Alma never got the gift, and he just starts laughing his head off. Alma just stared as Keith raised his hand, going off about how he hated that someone like Alma was even born into his family. He charges all his magic into his hand and swears that this is the spot where he's finally gonna take Alma down. Alma stares at the guy in total shock because she knows exactly what insane spell he's about to drop. She realizes he's screaming about how the blast will hit everyone nearby, but he honestly doesn't. Keith unleashes his thunder magic, and the whole spell looks incredibly smooth and stylish. Alma spots a spear made of pure lightning and wonders if his big brother is really about to blast through the ground and the shield. Alma knows that if a stray bullet hits a regular person, they're going to get seriously messed up. Heath is absolutely losing it, screaming at Alma to transform into coal while firing off a magic blast that catches Alma totally off guard. Keith's got a huge grin on his face as he watches a massive explosion go off. Heath just laughs as he sees the massive mark left behind by that attack. He lets out a sigh, but then his jaw drops when he realizes Alma is gone, and he's left wondering where his little brother could have vanished to. Keith was fuming with rage, but Alma watched from the rooftop and threw up a shield to save everyone from his brother's massive attack. Everyone on the street was freaking out, wondering how they even ended up trapped inside the shield. Alma pulled off a silent teleport with his space magic, and while nobody even saw it happen, it seriously drained a ton of his mana. Alma figured that lugging all those people around without using magic would leave him totally wiped out. Alma thinks his big brother is a total beast, but he's not cool with him dragging random people into his mess. Alma says sorry to her big brother right before she has to knock him out cold. Keith was absolutely fuming, so he threw his hands up and started charging his magic while demanding to know where Alma ran off to. Alma looked at his brother and realized his lightning magic was actually on a whole other level. But he had one major weakness, so Alma chucked a rock right at his brother's head, and as it bounced off, he started screaming to get his attention. Keith spins around, totally losing it, and demands to know how Alma actually survived that massive hit. Alma warns him it's not that simple this time, but Keith just laughs, saying the guy could have totally ambushed him instead of showing his face, while Alma explains he just wanted to answer. Alma says he doesn't need any cheap tricks to take down his big brother, and while Keith is still trying to figure out what he means, Alma quickly weaves some hand signs and unleashes. The kid decides to unleash his stone prison spell. Keith realizes stone walls are popping up all over the place. He screams at Alma, telling him not to underestimate him. Alma claps his hands together and Keith is fuming that Alma mastered lightning magic too, but then the guy asks if he missed one massive detail. Alma explains that his brother's magic just magnetized the whole ground to supercharge his attack, while Keith is totally stuck in a stone cage and losing his mind. Alma jumped in to help the people Keith almost took out, even helping an old lady get back on her feet. Everyone starts crowding around to thank him for saving their lives, but Alma tells him he should be apologizing instead, and before he can even explain what really happened, someone cuts him right off. The crowd told him to stop being so humble and just admit he was the one who saved them. At first, the guy just stared at everyone walking past him, looking totally shocked. He flashed a big grin and thanked every single one of them. Heath turns to Alma and asks how he learned those crazy spells, totally convinced that the guy is hiding something. Heath starts losing it, screaming about how he failed his dad by not becoming the sage, and since he thinks Alma is just feeling sorry for him to avoid making things worse, he demands an answer. Alma remembers Keith teaching him lightning magic, and how his brother called it the ultimate tool since you can use it to blast foes, or even pull objects toward you like a magnet. Alma totally looked up to his big brother and spent every day dreaming of finally catching up to him. Alma tells her brother to stop searching for him, and while he claims he's ditching the Empire for the East, he's actually lying and heading straight west. Alma just smirks and says he's done dealing with Keith's insane lightning magic, leaving Keith totally stunned before he breaks into a wild grin, realizing Alma is actually heading east. He calls the kid a total moron and asks Alma if she really thinks his big brother is just gonna let him walk away after that. Then Keith screams that he's gonna stalk his little brother. Alma turns back and says goodbye to her brother. Alma just walks away, leaving everyone totally stunned that he's actually gone, while a mysterious hooded girl watches the whole thing go down from the shadows. He wanders through the city and finally spots a ride that's heading straight for the west. The driver pointed to a seat, and as Alma hopped in, he just shook his head, realizing it was his first time ever in a cart, and he was already miles away from home. This blonde girl hops into the carriage, and the guy instantly recognizes her as the same person he saw back at the square. He snaps his head away the moment she looks over, wondering why she's even staring at him. This guy steps into the cart and announces he's there to do an inspection. A group of knights stops the carriage, warning that a dangerous magician was spotted nearby and they need to search every single passenger. Alma looks out and spots the knights. Then one of them asks for their papers, so a passenger shows his ID and gives them his last name. Wait, let's make it Punch. Alma took 10 steps while the knights checked the documents, wondering if he should just teleport away. The knight demanded to see Alma's papers, and just as the kid was shaking with fear, a girl suddenly jumped in and claimed he was her brother. Staring out at the knight, the girl says her name is Luna from the Western Flemish territories, and she's even got the papers to prove she's Alma's sister. The knight turns his focus to the other passengers and starts grilling them for answers. Luna heads back to her spot and snaps right back to her normal size. Alma looks over at the girl, wondering why on earth she's even helping him. He thinks she's just paying him back for saving her life in the square. But there might. Alma turns to the girl and thanks her for helping him survive those rough nights, telling her straight up that she saved his life. Alma reaches out to introduce himself, mentioning he saw her back at the square and is super stoked to finally meet her. Luna reaches out and shakes his hand. Alma finally lets out a huge sigh of relief. The girl just stands there, staring at him for a second. She starts thinking back to that crazy... Out of nowhere, Luna starts talking about teleportation, and when the guy turns around, he catches her whispering that spatial magic is insanely hard, and almost nobody can master it. She took a second to think before turning to Alma, and he immediately looked back at her wondering what was up. Luna turned to the guy and asked him for a favor, and he just stared back at her with a totally serious look. Alma kept his eyes on her while she struggled to speak, until she finally gripped her knees, looked up, and asked if he'd travel back to her homeland with her. Emma asks why she's bringing him back to her homeland, and the girl explains he's the only person she trusts with this secret mission. Alma thinks it over for a second and says he gets it now, figuring she only helped him so he'd take her back to his home. Luna looks the guy right in the eyes and asks him what all of this is supposed to mean. She starts waving her arms like crazy, shouting that he's got the wrong idea, and he definitely doesn't have to do it. Luna turns bright red and looks away, admitting she just wanted to help Alma, and the guy is totally caught off guard. Alma suddenly bursts out laughing, and when the girl asks what's so funny, he apologizes and explains that while he'd love to help Luna, he's actually being followed right now. Luna closes her eyes and admits her request is super random, telling him to go handle his own stuff first, while Alma stays quiet and starts thinking about his next move. Alma grinded so hard in his past life to master insane magic just to be happy now, and he's seriously considering using force to get what he wants. Elma looks up at the girl and asks her what happiness really means to her. Luna's totally confused why he's asking all these weird questions, but Elma says he just wants to know what she thinks about it. Luna looks away for a second, blushing as she thinks about her parents, and tells him that family is her true happiness. But he just asks, "Why family?" Luna says her people are everything to her, and seeing her friends and family laughing and living their best lives is the only thing that truly makes her happy. Alma stares at her in total shock, while Luna just tilts her head and asks if he's actually cool with that answer. Alma breaks it down, saying she's only happy when everyone else is, which he thinks is actually super noble, and she just stares at him, waiting to hear what he says next. Luna asks if Alma really fought his big brother, and as he looks up at her totally confused, she explains she was at the square and caught part of his talk with Keith. Luna's not totally sure, but she thinks she heard her brother say he got kicked out, so she asks if his own family really dumped him, and he just laughs. Luna's convinced Alma is only out for revenge, but the guy just stays dead quiet for a while. He crosses his arms and rants about how everyone ditched him, taking everything he owned, including his own home. He tells them there's something way more important than all this, explaining that his home is where he grew up with people he's known since he was a kid, and that... Luna asks why he's being so nice, but Alma reveals that he actually thinks he's a total coward with zero guts. Alma says sorry and tells Luna he needs the night to think her offer over, so she agrees to wait until tomorrow for his big decision. Alma makes up his mind to finally give the girl an answer, thanking Luna one last time for everything she's done. Kit sprints into his dad's office and bursts through the door, shouting for him, but his father is nowhere in sight, only the maid is standing there. He was totally fuming because he couldn't just go after Alma without asking, but then a maid told him her dad gave the order to bring her back home no matter what it took. The dad sat there thinking about Alma actually being able to take Keith down. He knew that even without a special gift, Alma was skilled enough to wreck a high-level mage. He was sure this. The maid spilled the whole story to Keith and confirmed those were Mr. P's exact words. Keith's jaw dropped in shock as he balled up his fist, squeezing so hard that Keith started cussing up a storm. He knew if Alma showed up again, everything would just go back to the way it used to be. He figured things might even get way worse this. Heath tells the maid to let his dad know Alma is heading west, and she rushes off to deliver the message. Keith flashed a wicked grin, knowing it was way too dangerous to mess with his dad, and he was sure he was the only one who knew Alma was making a run for the east. He threw on his coat and smirked, knowing there was no turning back now. Alma better stay put, because Keith was about to make him pay for every single thing he'd done. Keith tried to trick his dad, but he accidentally sent him straight to the right place. So the whole crowd follows Alma straight to the west, while Keith just drifts off toward the east. Right then, Alma started making his way toward the city of Calistello. The carriage carrying the kid finally rolled into the massive trading city. Alma ducks into a nearby tavern to pay for a room, and the manager points him toward his bed at the very end of the hallway. After blowing 2,000 gold, he and Luna trekked across the empire to a massive trade city, where they had no choice but to pull up at a tavern. Alma needed to stack some cash to keep moving, but with Fellow's goons probably right behind him, he was seriously running out of time. Alma thinks about hitting up a dungeon for some quick gold, but then it hits him. What if his past self actually stashed some secret treasure there for him to find? He thrusts his hand out and triggers his spatial magic to activate spell storage. Suddenly, a cube and a table with weird writing pop up right in front of him, and he realizes this magic lets him create a storage space in another dimension that gets bigger the stronger his magic is. He realizes he was stressing for nothing, since back in his old life he stashed all his gear away, never thinking he'd actually need it in this new world. He dumped out his entire inventory, revealing a massive pile of animal hides and gross monster parts like eyeballs, tails, and fangs. Alma grinned, knowing that selling all this gear would finally pay for his trip and fix his money problems. He stared at the floating screen, wondering what to do with his leftover loot while praying he wouldn't cause a massive scene. He wondered if he'd ever find epic loot from slaying dragons, but figured it'd be totally worthless since nobody would even want it. Alma figures things can't get any messier than they already are. He decides to hit up the guild tomorrow to finally get some answers. As he stares out the window, he can't. Back at the tavern, the girl sat on her bed and stared out the window, wondering what kind of craziness tomorrow would bring. The boy stepped right into the massive guild building. He tracked down the main adventurer guild right in the heart of the trading city. Since everyone comes here to chill out, the whole place was absolutely packed. Just as the kid was wondering where to sell his magic loot, an adventurer suddenly slammed a boy's head onto the floor right behind him, complaining about how heavy it was. Alma whips around, spots the adventurer, and the guy just starts screaming his head off. The adventurer says sorry, and Alma walks over to see if they're actually okay. The adventurer just grins and says sorry for barging in. He explains that the boar was so massive it totally blocked Alma from view. Alma takes one look and thinks the guy is probably around. He saw the blood on the adventurer's face and totally thought he just got banged up during the monster fight. Alma's totally blaming himself because he didn't want the guy to drop the head. But the adventurer tells him to relax since monsters always just faceplant on their own once they're knocked out. This guy Roel introduces himself as an adventurer, and since he can tell Alma is new around here, he asks how he can help him out. Alma introduces himself and says he's just looking for a place to sell his loot, so Raoul offers to lead him straight to a pawn shop. They head over to the pawn shop together, and Alma admits he's a total outsider who's completely broke, which is the whole reason he even showed up. Raoul asks if it's really Alma's first time at the guild and says he hopes the kid isn't trying to be an adventurer, which totally surprises Alma since that's not. Alma says if he can just sell these items, he's heading straight to Familia. Raoul thinks that sounds pretty interesting. Alma asks if he's being weird, but Raoul tells him it. Raoul points out how this massive guild is packed with adventurers, and all these people have created a social ladder he totally hates. Ro admits that's exactly why he asked Alma to join the guild, since he was already planning to talk him out of it. Alma notices a huge bruise on the kid's shoulder, and wonders what kind of insane fight Raoul went through to get so banged up. Just as the boy turns around to stare him down, Alma points at the boar and insists it's the reason Raoul is covered in bruises, but the guy just laughs it off and tells her the animal didn't actually do that to him. Alma spots the administrator walking over, and as both boys turn around, a girl greets them and asks if they're selling loot or have their adventurer cards ready. Alma has no clue what card they're talking about, so the lady explains that the shop is for guild members only and asks to see their IDs. Elma really didn't want to deal with all that guilt, but he was totally stuck, so he was just going to grab the papers and turn them in until Raoul suddenly caught his eye. Roll winks and offers to lend him his card, telling him he can just sell all his loot under his name. He figures the staff can't possibly remember every single face, so he's sure the girl won't notice a thing. Alma whips around to face Raoul. Alma tells the guy he's being way too loud and that everyone can hear him. Raoul rubs the back of his head and says he's sorry they didn't talk about this sooner, but the admin just smirks because he can tell the guy is a total fail at lying. The admin reaches out and says it's totally fine since the rules don't actually ban it, and because the card owner is cool with it, she lets the guys pass and hits them. Raoul says it's time to hit the pawn shop and see what their loot is worth. The three of them head inside, and Alma immediately spots a crazy weapon hanging right over his head. Elma and Raoul headed over to the gun rack where a guy in a bandana was waiting and handed him all their loot to sell. The guy says he usually drops 5,000 gold for boar skins and claws. They brought him way too many this year, so he's only going to take 3,500 gold coins. Raoul just kicks back with his hands behind his head, saying he's totally fine as long as he's got enough to get by. The man is absolutely massive. He mentions that Ross. The guy turns to the kid and asks why he isn't hunting the massive monsters, since he's obviously got some serious skills. Raoul laughs as he remembers his buddy needs help, and man, that guy is still a total giant. He looks over at Alma and asks why that dude is waving his finger around in the air. Alma tells the guy to chill because the kid is about to pull everything he needs straight from his inventory, leaving Raoul and the man totally shocked and wondering what he's actually planning. Alma realizes he's the only one who can see the screen, so he swipes his hand across it and a cube pops out, leaving Roll and the man totally stunned. Raoul whipped around to ask Alma what kind of crazy trick he just pulled, but the guy told him it wasn't a stunt, it was actually a storage facility. A guy walks up to Alma and is totally blown away that a kid his age mastered such a crazy spell, but Alma just says it's no big deal, leaving the man completely confused. The guy says that with a spell like this, you could easily make a fortune as a merchant. The guys just stay quiet for a long, awkward moment. Raoul turns to Alma and calls it mind-blowing, but Alma admits he's just as surprised because he always thought magic was just a simple tool. Raoul looks over at what Alma brought and his eyes go wide with total shock. He asks what the guy brought and starts checking it out, spotting a fire dragon's tail, a sharp fang, and even a belt from a demon general. Alma's totally confused by the kid's reaction, especially since he's sure the stuff he grabbed from the inventory is actually super important. Alma says sorry and asks if the stuff he found is seriously going to cost that little. The guy's eyes go wide and he starts shouting, asking why the heck he's talking like that. Turns out the stuff he brought is actually going to cost a fortune, and Alma is totally freaking out. The guy checks out the loot and asks Alma where he even found it since you can't buy this stuff anywhere. And after looking at the fang, he warns that the fire dragon is a rank of beast that would toast any weak adventurer in less than a minute. The guy starts begging and even drops to his knees to show he's serious, asking Alma if he can finally buy the materials. The guy figures Alma is just trying to flip the loot for a massive profit, so he starts hitting up every shop in town to compare prices. The guy asks Alma for her materials and convinces her it's a once-in-a-lifetime deal, so she agrees to sell him every single thing he needs. The guy looks up and asks if he's actually serious. Alma spreads her arms to double down on her promise, and the boy tells him to finally get off his knees. The guy starts sobbing and thanks him over and over. He swears he'll pay back every single cent he owes. He tells Alma to just hang tight for a bit. Then Raoul walks up. He whips out a pencil and starts jotting down the supplies and exactly how much cash he's dropping for them. Alma checks the price list and sees he's getting a massive 2 million for the materials, making Raoul's jaw hit the floor as he asks if he heard that right because Alma was totally shocked by the huge payout and realized the rest of the vault was a literal gold mine, so he's staying on high alert to make sure he doesn't get scammed or robbed. The guy wipes his face and admits he's never seen loot this good before, geeking out over how perfect everything is since it stayed fresh in storage. Then he waves goodbye to the group and Alma bows and thanks the guy for the massive payout, but the man turns away in tears, feeling like he's the one who should be grateful for the epic materials he just received. Alma and Raoud head to the front desk, and the girl is totally blown away that he's actually getting paid 2.5 million. Alma and Raoul hit up a nearby restaurant and order a massive mountain of food. But Raoul starts feeling awkward and asks if he even deserves this treat since he hasn't really done anything for her yet. Alma starts hyping the guy up, telling him he's the real MVP and that he couldn't have pulled it off without him. He's so thankful that he even offers to. Raoul demands to know where Alma got all that loot, since he's totally sure the guy couldn't have taken down those monsters solo. Alma freezes, wipes his mouth, and realizes he's got to keep his past life a total secret. So he quickly lies and says he's from a rich family that gave him all this gear as a parting gift when they kicked him out. Raoul gives the kid a worried look and admits he's also been through some crazy stuff, so Alma apologizes for being such a jerk, but Raoul just tells him it's totally fine. Alma admits he's actually glad he left home since he can finally start his big plans, and while Raoul is totally stunned at first, he just smirks when he realizes Alma has grown into a seriously strong guy. Alma asks Raoul if he really thinks he's that tough, and he's like, yeah, because staying positive and never giving up is its own kind of strength. Raoul gets dead serious and says he wants that power too, gripping his hands tight under the table as Almano notices the shift and asks if this is all about Raoul's hidden abilities. Rowan looks up and tells Alma she probably heard from the pawn shop guy that he only hunts weaklings. But then he looks away and admits his whole body starts shaking whenever he faces a strong opponent. Raoul basically gives up before the fight even starts and just expects to lose. He looks at his enemies and tells himself they're way too strong for him to handle. The guy is totally frozen with fear and can't even move a muscle. Alma is locked in, listening to every word, while Raoul just laughs and scratches his head. He's starting. Alma tells Roel he's just as strong as she is, and when he's confused, she asks why he's so hard on himself when he's actually the kindest. Alma points his finger up like he's making a huge statement, telling Verkus he's got the heart of a leader, and as Raoul blushes, Alma realizes Alma thinks Raoul is super smart about what he can actually do. Since he's not full of himself, he's got the perfect foundation to become a total beast later on. Alma knows. Alma grins and tells Raoul that if he works hard, he'll definitely become a top-tier adventurer, pointing a thumb at his chest to guarantee it. Raoul turns bright red and thanks the kid for having his back, wiping away a happy tear while calling Alma super wise. He even starts laughing because he feels like he's talking to a genius grandpa. Alma turns bright red, realizing the guy is actually right since he lived to be nearly 100 in his first life. The tavern bell suddenly rings, making Alma and Raoul snap their heads toward the guys walking in as one of them asks Raoul how he's doing. Raoul tensed up and hugged himself tight, looking totally freaked out by the man's scary appearance. The doorbell just kept ringing as a crowd flooded into the tavern, and they all marched right up to where Alma and Raoul were sitting. Raoul totally freaked out the second he saw that guy covered in scars. The man looked right at the kid and started talking. Almost just stood there, waiting to hear what he was going to. Raoul looks away and greets the guy as Evan, telling him that if he's there for the adventurer's fee, he won't have the cash until the end of the month. Evan laughs and slams his hand on the table, leaning right into the guy's face. Raoul just hangs his head in shame. Evan turns to Alma and asks if this dude really showed. The guy holds up his hand and says the guild has rules, sighing as he tells the kid that everyone has to pay the adventurer's fee. Raoul is starting to lose his cool, but Evan thinks Alma is just a new recruit, so he tries to pressure the guy into paying his guild fees. Raoul suddenly kicks a chair, making Evan stare at him and ask what the heck he's doing. Raoul just smirks and tells Evan he's totally wrong, explaining that Alma is just a client and not an adventurer, so he doesn't owe the guild a single cent before mock. Evan smirks and asks Raoul what's gotten into him, noticing the kid's acting way tougher now just because he got a massive payday for helping out. Alma has no clue what Rowan and Evan are whispering about, but then someone suddenly calls his name. He spins around to see the girl at the front desk looking super serious, and she tells him. Emma agrees and stands up. Raoul smirks right behind him, and Evan is just standing there totally clueless about what's happening. Raoul clenches his fist and tells Alma he's got stuff to handle, so Alma should head to the front desk to find the girl. He gives him a quick pat on the... Alma looks down at his hand and realizes Raoul just gave him his registration card, leaving him totally confused about why he'd do that. Alma knows something is totally wrong because the guys who just walked into the tavern look like they're looking for a fight. The receptionist reveals that the 3 guys who just walked in are elite B ranks with insane power, but they've got the absolute worst personalities. She explains that this gang shakes down every adventurer for cash every single month, and since they're the strongest ones around, nobody even dreams of standing up to them. Alma asks if she called him for help, and she looks down, explaining that Raoul actually went with Evan's gang just so Alma could leave the guild in peace. She figures Raoul gave him... She slams a bag of gold on the counter, tells the guy to take his cut, and warns Alma to get out of the city as fast as possible. Blood sprays across the alley as Raoul catches his breath in a fighting stance, and Evan asks the guy if he's finally ready to give up. The bandits snatch the guy's wallet but get annoyed that he's broke, so Evan tells them to go after Alma instead since he's definitely the one with the real cash. Roll's hands were shaking like crazy because he was terrified to keep fighting, and when one of the bandits saw him trembling, he just started laughing his head off. Evan flashes a grin and offers Roll a deal, making the guy ask what he's got in mind. Evan tells the guy that if he puts in the work, they'll split the cash and give him a high-ranking spot in the guild, but then he asks if the guy really trusts Alma. Raoul grinds his teeth and clutches his sword even tighter, turning down the deal and making Evan absolutely lose it. The guy gets right in Raoul's face and starts throwing hands, giving him zero time to block or hit back, while Evan just clicks his tongue and mocks him, asking if he'd... Raoul starts cracking up and looks up to say something, but Evan just gives him the deadliest stare. Raoul just met Alma, but he can already tell this guy is on a whole different level than other adventurers, especially since even the pawnshop owner was blown away by his magic and those rare materials he summoned, proving that his noble blood makes his skills absolutely insane. Raoul grips his sword tight and says that even with all that power, he wasn't faking who he was and he never truly supported him. Raoul is super sure of himself and says there's no way he'd ever betray him. Raoul looks Evans dead in the eye and says Alma was the only one who ever really believed in him, and even if he loses the Zali, he's just honored he got to protect her. Evan gives the guy a death stare and absolutely decks him, sending him crashing straight to the ground. Evan gets right in his face and tells him he's sick of people who think like that, while his goons tell him to just finish Raoul off so they can finally go find Alma. Evan rips his sword out and takes a swing, reminding Raoul that he's the one who wanted to go out with honor. Ro collapses on the ground in tears and begs Alma for forgiveness, since he really thought he was completely out of options. Ra was starting to think his dream of becoming a top-tier adventurer was never actually going to happen. Raoul was just about to pass out when he caught a glimpse of Alma's silhouette, making him snap his eyes wide open to ask what she was even doing there. Alma stood off to the side, giving those bandits the ultimate death stare. Raoul scrambled up from the dirt, asking Alma what he was even doing there. Alma didn't even blink as he marched right. Raoul scrambles to his feet and begs Alma to let him bolt, warning her that these thugs are the strongest adventurers in town, and they're only after his cash, so he doesn't want her getting dragged into this mess. Evan stomped on Raoul and told him to shut his mouth. The kid started coughing like crazy before totally blacking out. He just lay there on the dirt, not saying another word. He turns to the kid and tries to bribe him to stay out of the fight, asking if he could even handle spending 2.5 million gold coins all by himself. He explains that these bandits are actually known as the top-tier adventurers in the whole city. He looks up at the bandits like they're total garbage and starts talking major smack. Alma says these bandits are just low-level thugs who only know how to bully people, so he doesn't even see them as real rivals since they only pick on those who can't fight back. Evan's eyes snap wide with rage and he starts swearing, shouting that he would have let the guy walk if he just paid up, but now he's so ticked off there. The guy shouts for his goons, Peter and Jake, and Peter tosses him a potion called Steel Skin. Jake kicks things into high gear and unleashes his magic enhancement aggressive force. Evan gets a massive power boost, pulls out his weapon with a creepy grin, and asks Alma if he really thought he was just some basic guy with a sword. The guy just snaps his weapon and flexes that he's as strong as a massive orc, while Evan brags that his skin is now so tough that nothing can pierce it, basically telling the dude he's got zero chance of winning. Evan charges at Alma with a wild scream and his fist ready to strike, but she just stares him down with a totally blank look on her face. The punch is inches from his face when he just catches it, looking totally unbothered. Evan's eyes go wide with total shock because he can't believe his punch just got shut down, and Alma is crushing his hand like it's nothing while a vein literally pops. Peter and Jake were totally freaking out over Alma's insane strength. They thought there was no way this could be real. Jake couldn't understand how Alma blocked Evan using just one hand. That bandit. Alma explains that back in his old life, he was totally obsessed with magic and didn't care about anything else. He balls up his fist and shouts that his natural-born strength is still way better than Evan's. A second later, Alma absolutely blasted Evan with a heavy hit. Peter and Jake just stood there with their jaws dropped. He was way smaller than Evan, but that hit was seriously powerful. Evan dropped his head and started coughing, but Alma didn't stop and slammed him again, making Peter and Jake back away in total fear as they watched their leader get absolutely wrecked by those. Everyone watched in total shock as Alma absolutely blasted Evan. He went flying right past them and slammed hard into the back wall. Evan just crumpled onto the floor. He didn't even move for a second. Peter was in total shock that Evan lost even after getting those crazy upgrades. Jake couldn't wrap his head around how Alma became so insanely powerful. Right then, Alma was just staring down at his. Evan tried to scramble back up with his hands shaking like crazy, totally stunned that a smaller guy actually wrecked him, but he was still ready to keep the fight going. Alma saw the guy was already picking himself up off the floor. He mentioned that Evan was actually super strong. He really thought just one hit would have knocked the dude out cold. Evan asked Alma why. Evan, Peter, and Jake just stood there, totally on edge while waiting for an answer. Alma couldn't figure out why he was so ticked off. But then it hit him that he and Raoul were basically total strangers, and he'd never felt anything like this in his entire life. Evan barks at his goon to take Raoul out the moment he gives the signal. Peter walks over and puts a cold blade right against Raoul's throat. He's totally ready. Elmo's eyes went wide as he started wondering if he and Raoul were even friends, since they'd only just met, and he hadn't really thought about it until now. Alma remembers being a total hermit in his past life, and even though he's a rich noble now, he still doesn't have a single real friend. Alma really thought Raoul was a solid guy. He was positive Raoul would do whatever it takes to help the people he loved. Honestly, someone like Raoul totally deserves to be happy. Right then, Alma remembers Luna talking about how much she truly loves the people back in her homeland. His eyes go wide as he remembers she was only truly happy when her friends and family were laughing, and in that moment, everything finally clicks. Elma asks Evan if he's actually hiding some secret power, but Evan admits Alma is way stronger and points to his head, saying that for an adventurer, brains are what really matter. Evan tells Alma that a real adventurer has to know how to trap their enemies and totally flip the script when things get intense. He just laughs and says that's exactly what's going down, acting like he's already won and telling the guy to quit trying to be a hero. He says he wants the smiles and starts laughing like a maniac, making Evan stare him down and ask what's so funny because the guy is seriously creeping him out. Alma says he just figured something out and starts marching forward, leaving Evan totally confused and yelling for him to stop. But the man warns him that his goons can take out Raoul whenever he gives the. Alma says that even if they don't agree, he's sure there's one thing that should be totally obvious to everyone. He gets dead serious and tells them that the winner of this fight was already decided from the very beginning. Alma reminds him of what he did when he first arrived, but Evan is totally clueless and has no idea what she means. Out of nowhere, Peter and Jake just collapse and black out instantly. Evan screamed his head off, demanding his goons tell him what the heck just happened to them. I might just have to unleash my nightmare summoning magic. These creepy shadow monsters popped out of nowhere and lunged straight at the bandit. Evan saw something totally horrifying and let out a massive scream. A few minutes later, Raoul finally wakes up to the sound of Alma using her healing magic. He stumbles to his feet while clutching his head, then stares at Evan on the ground. A bunch of creepy shadow monsters were literally all over Evan. Alma walks right up to Raoul and tells him he used that nightmare summoning magic, making Raoul snap his head toward him instantly. Alma explains that these shadow monsters trap people in nasty nightmares just to snack on their fear. He reveals he actually summoned them and kept them hidden way before the fight even started. Raoul is totally shocked that Evan just lay there on the ground and started bawling his eyes out. Alma wondered what Evan was dreaming about, but Raoul just laughed at his tears, stoked that the bandit finally got what he deserved. Raoul says sorry to Alma, and as the boy looks over, Raoul admits he tried to help, but Alma ended up saving him instead, making Alma just let out a big sigh. Raoul says he really believed in his own power, but he was still totally weak. The guy tells Raoul to stop talking bad about himself. Then Alma explains he's only there to give him one thing, and Raul asks what it is. "I'm handing over the registration card," he said, dropping a major truth bomb about what it actually takes to be an adventurer, and Raul's face turned bright red as he started. Alma smiles and tells Raul he's going to be an awesome adventurer because he really believes in him, which makes Raul smile back even as he starts crying. Alma pulls Ra back to his feet, and Ra thanks him, promising he'll definitely pay him back for the help. Raul and Alma head over to Luna's place, and Alma gives her door a quick knock. Luna peeks outside and spots Alma standing there. She notices the bandits and asks who the heck they are. Alma turns around and says he just needs a lift to the guild. But first, he turns back to her and says he's finally made his choice, and she looks at him with total excitement. Alma clutches her chest and says she's totally in, but then, while a bird chirps outside, Alma is totally wiped out on the floor, desperately clutching her bedsheet. Alma stands up clutching his pounding head, remembering the wild party they threw to celebrate their trip to the moon's homeland, and he's pretty sure they definitely overdid it with the drinks. Alma taps her forehead and fires off a healing spell, but when he turns around, he finds Luna just chilling on his bed and has no clue why she's even there. The girl finally wakes up and hops out of bed, giving the one-eyed guy a cheerful good morning, and since he totally forgot about the Moonlease drama, he invites her to stay the night. Luna stared at the guy for a long moment, then looked away and told him she had a total blast last night. Alma, Luna, and Raul are cruising in a carriage when Alma notices Raul's big grin and asks what's up. But while he's trying to figure out an answer, Raul finally gives Alma an answer, pointing his finger and asking if he and Luna went to the guild, which makes Alma ask what's actually going down there. Raul explains how the bandits actually bowed down and apologized to all the adventurers, while Evan was straight up sobbing and begging for mercy. Raul says the bandits suddenly started apologizing and giving back all the money, thinking they were totally spooked by some insane nightmares. Raul turns to Luna and admits he just tagged along out of nowhere, asking if he's being annoying, but Luna tells him it's totally fine since he looks like he can actually hold his own. Ro speaks up and says they should all just team up. Alma wonders how they'll pull it off. Raul asks if the guy is actually down, and Alma says he's cool with it even though he's always been a solo player. Alma was always a lone wolf in his past life, so he finally decides to join a team for the fun of it, and Luna is totally backing him up. Raul looks super satisfied, but then he suddenly shouts that it's time for the welcoming gift competition, leaving Alma and Luna totally confused. Raul says it's time to get started and hands over the wind cutter as a special gift. Alma figures this gift is the ultimate shortcut for leveling up his sword skills and wind magic, even though he knows it's going to be a total grind. Raul says this ritual is a total must for any new team. He explains that the person with the weakest gift has to pay for everyone's food. Luna just stares at him like Raul just laughs because he's totally sure he's got this in the bag. Then he turns to the girl and asks what she's bringing as a gift. Then the girl drops the word sage. Alma starts thinking about her dad and how he, his brothers, and basically everyone else were dying to become sages. Raul is totally hyped about her power, and admits he's never met a real sage before. Alma remembers how his dad used this power to boss everyone around, and he's totally shocked to find someone else with the same insane gift so soon. Luna gives Raul a pat on the shoulder and says wind cutter is actually a sick gift, and while Raul agrees, he admits he was definitely acting a bit too cocky. Raul turns to Alma and asks what the kid's gift is, wanting to know what kind of crazy rare ability he's hiding. Alma completely freezes up for a few seconds as his brain starts spinning with way too many thoughts. Raul calls out to Alma after he stays quiet for way too long, and Alma is low-key panicking that his friends will find out he was kicked out for having no powers, but Raul tells the guy he doesn't have to talk since he's not forcing him, so the dude looks at Luna, tells her to back off, and asks if he's got it all right. Luna's totally down and admits she just wanted to flex a bit. Then she tells Alma he's off the hook, making him super embarrassed as he thanks his crew and promises to give them the... Alma realizes he's found an awesome squad and feels like the luckiest guy alive. Roll doesn't even know Alma's secret gift yet, but he's 100% sure the guy is a total beast after seeing him use Vault and summoning magic. And while he's wondering what else is up his sleeve, Luna reveals that Alma can actually teleport at a crazy high level. Raul is blown away by Alma's skills and asks if there's anything he can't pull off, but the guy honestly thinks he can do it all. Alma finds out that the only way to check someone's power level is with the assessment spell, so he asks the guys if he can use it on them, and Raul is actually super hyped to see his stats. Alma covers her eyes and sets off a massive flash of light that leaves Luna and Raul totally blinded. Once the light fades, Alma finally gets a good look at what Raul really looks like. He looks up at the moon and starts noticing all the weird details. Alma starts piecing things together. Luna and Raul are dying to know what the guy actually saw. He explains that everyone has specific numbers that show off their skills. Alma spots that Raoul is already at level. Raoul asks about Alma's stats, and while Luna thinks she's totally OP, Alma just looks away and says Raoul is slightly stronger, which he realizes isn't exactly a lie. Alma switches gears and points out that since Luna just got her gift, her magic stats are totally insane and way higher than most kids her age. Alma notices that Luna's basic stats are actually pretty weak, but some of her other skills are way more powerful. Luna brags about all the monsters she wrecked on her way here. She's pretty sure all that combat is why her magic is leveling up so fast. Raoul is stunned that it's actually that. Hearing this, Alma realizes he totally forgot the monsters from his past life, because he was way too obsessed with grinding his magic power. He's totally sure Luna is going to be a legendary mage, but then Raoul realizes they haven't run into a single monster the whole way, and that feels super sketchy. The driver looks back and warns them they're definitely going to run into some goblins on this road. He thinks they might have just bailed, but it feels super sketchy, like maybe a way scarier monster showed up and chased them off. As the carriage heads for the city, a massive wolf monster is stalking them from the shadows, staying completely hidden. Alma kept eyeing the carriage windows with a bad gut feeling even though she couldn't see anything, while Raoul told the driver to zip it before he jinxed them and caused a scene. Luna, Alma, and Raoul rolled up to the border city in their cart. They cleared the checkpoint and started trekking on foot. The trio finally headed out. To reach Luna's home, the crew realized they had to pull over. Right at the edge of the woods, everyone finally stopped to get some rest. Luna got a campfire going. Raoul started setting up all the tents. Alma's storage was packed with gear from his past life. He decided it was finally time to put it all to use. There were so many different items in there, and even the moon looked like it was in a totally bad mood. She talked about how she had to lug around a massive backpack when she left the estate. It was a total pain to travel with. She really wished she had a storage skill like that. Raoul just laughs. Elma thinks it's way too quiet, and he's getting suspicious because he's totally expecting a monster to jump out and attack. Suddenly, he hears a rustle in the bushes and turns to see a massive wolf staring him down, making him totally on edge as the beast locks eyes with him. Alma finally recognized Fenrir and realized the small monsters were staying away because they were absolutely terrified of the massive wolf following them. While Raoul and Luna were busy talking about food, Alma couldn't stop thinking about Fenrir. He knew this wolf was super smart and a total beast when it came to fighting. Out of nowhere, a voice pops into the kid's head with a question, and Alma realizes Fenrir is talking straight to his brain using telepathy. He's pretty sure he's never met Fenrir before, and Fenrir agrees they're total strangers, explaining he only tracked the kid down to see what kind of new monster was lurking. Alma starts to wonder if Fenrir is Loki talking about him. Rear then asks Alma if he has any clue how much mana he's actually packing. The kid stares Fenrir right in the eyes. He tells the wolf that if it's talking about mana, he knows exactly how much power he's packing. Alma thinks back to all that. Fenrir says Alma's magic is so scary that it sent every monster running and threw the whole forest into total chaos. Alma was totally stumped on why his magic was the one scaring the monsters instead of Fenrir's. After that tavern disaster, Alma started hiding his mana deep inside, only letting it out when he was actually casting a spell. This guy mentions that wild animals have way sharper senses than humans do. Alma knows. He throws up a hand seal to activate Namuris, and just like that, his magical energy starts to shrink away. Fenrir stares at the kid, totally losing it. He can't believe that massive aura just vanished into thin air. It's like he's staring through a thick fog and can't. The wolf suddenly snaps his head toward Raoul and Luna, sensing something's off and getting totally ready to strike back. Luna was just chilling by the fire with Raoul when she suddenly felt Alma's energy start to fade away. She whipped around and called out her name, making Raoul realize she was totally freaked out, and Fenrir glares at Luna and Raoul with a look that'll give you nightmares. He knows the jig is up and they've finally seen him. Luna and Raoul are totally freaked out, and Raoulu hits the ground and tries to scramble away, but when he sees Fenrir, he realizes he's looking at a terrifying S-class monster, which finally explains why they haven't run into any other enemies yet. Alma looks at his crew, takes all the blame, and stands up to tell Raoul to chill because Fenrir isn't actually a threat. Suddenly, Fenrir yells at Duck to hit the deck. Alma looks at the wolf, totally confused about why he'd give that order. Then Alma turns his head toward Luna. Luna stares down Fenrir and weaves a hand seal, summoning a mysterious woman's shadow that blasts a massive beam of magic the moment she triggers her grace spell. Fenrir was totally on guard, locking eyes with the girl and seeing she meant business right before she unleashed one of her most insane spells. Luna's blast didn't even touch Fenrir. Both of them were totally shocked when her magic just vanished into thin air. They had no idea what just happened and just stood there staring at each. Alma walks right up to the wolf and tells him he already broke the spell on the machine, saying the wolf looked like he needed a hand, and he didn't want this fight getting way out of control. Fenrir glares at Alma, and the kid starts apologizing like crazy, saying Luna was just scared and he never expected her to just start attacking him out of nowhere. Fenrir thinks it was totally rude to show up in the middle of the night, so he wants to apologize since he really didn't mean to scare the travelers or pick a fight. Alma turns to the girl and tells her the wolf isn't there to hurt anyone. He points out that if a Fenrir wanted them dead, they'd be gone before they even blinked. Alma's wondering what kind of crazy spell Luna just used. He's guessing she pulled out a move called Eternal Fatigue. The magic energy felt a lot like a summoning spell, but Fenrir finally sets the record straight and reveals she's actually a girl, mostly because she didn't like the way the guy was talking to her. Luna asks if Alma can actually talk to Fenrir, and when Alma explains it's all through telepathy, Luna is totally blown away that this guy knows way more magic than a pro sage like her. Raoul was hiding behind a tree and asked Alma why Lady Fenrir even showed up to see them. Alma tried to speak up, but the she-wolf cut him off and said that someone actually wanted to meet him. Alma asked who was looking for him and what they actually wanted. The she-wolf explained that this person was super curious about his aura. He said he was totally down to meet someone new. Alma couldn't help but wonder what kind of insane high-level monster was actually hanging out with Fenrir herself. The mama wolf thanks him and says her son was dying to meet him, and right then, a tiny wolf cub pops up right next to her. The little wolf cub was totally hyped. He stared at Alma with wide eyes, looking at him like a total hero. The little guy realized this dude wasn't scary at all. He expected Alma was totally lost looking at the little guy, but then Luna and Raoul showed up, blushing like crazy because the wolf cub was just way too cute. Raoul, Luna, and Alma look super worried as the wolf cub hitches a ride on Raoul's back, geeking out about being Alma's biggest fan before jumping up and wagging his tail to ask if he actually scared them. Luna and Raoul were blushing like crazy because they thought the wolf cub was so cute, while Alma just watched the little guy and rubbed the back of his head. Luna walks right up to the wolf cub and starts petting him, asking where his favorite spot is, and Raoul explains that since he's super fluffy like his mom, he absolutely loves the attention. The wolf cub kept begging for more head pats, and Alma realized the little guy was just totally loving life. Raoul is busy begging Luna to let him pet the cub, but Alma turns her full attention to Fenrir and asks what someone like her would even be doing in these lands. He stopped to think for a second and told them he had business past the woods, even though he was totally lost since Luna hadn't given him any real details. The wolf looked back, thinking about that land past the trees and realizing it's probably the exact spot where those forest monsters rule the open fields. Alma asks what these things are, and the wolf explains that since the forest is running out of food, all these monsters are swarming toward human towns to find a meal. Alma thought back to that tiny spot Tanatat where they stopped before, and figured Luna's land would probably be just as small. When monsters raid these lands, it's a total nightmare for the people living there. Everyone starts ditching their homes and running toward the capital to stay safe. Since everyone's gone, Alma realized this was the exact mess he needed to fix for Luna, and it was actually way easier for him since he wouldn't have to chase down scattered monsters anymore. Alma looks up and thanks the wolf for the info, but Fenrir just laughs it off. She asks Alma what her next move is, wondering if she should just tell the monsters to stop. Alma just grins and says everything's fine, but he's already planning how to use this whole mess to his advantage. The she-wolf tenses up and asks if he's planning something shady, but Alma just flashes a smile and tells her to chill because this deal is a win-win for everyone, and she actually buys it. Fenrir says Alma's heart is way purer than anyone else's, and the boy wonders how a she-wolf can even see inside him. She tells them she just knows this from experience, but Alma is totally lost and has no clue what they're even talking about. This she-wolf has been alive for 1,000 years, and says she's seen so many people that she can tell exactly who you are just by looking into your eyes. Alma notices the wolf actually likes people, and Fenrir totally agrees, explaining she's not trying to invade, she just wants to live closer to the village. Fenrir tells the gang to hit her up whenever they need backup, because she's not about to owe Alma any favors. The wolf pup tells his mom he's going with Alma, but she shuts that down immediately, and they both walk away, leaving the group behind. The rest of the night was dead silent, but Alma was already thinking Fenrir owed him big time just for meeting her son. Alma put out the fire and hit the road with Luna and Raoul, finally reaching the territory of Frandl, which was actually Luna's old home. Luna pointed the way and the squad kept moving, but Alma stopped dead in her tracks when she saw an axe stuck in an old stump. The whole place was a total ghost town, So Raoul just kicked back with his hands behind his head and complained about how it was way more of a backwater than he expected, and Alma totally agreed. Alma spots some birds chilling on a tree branch right next to the house where Luna and the squad finally stop. Luna whips around to ask what's going on, but Raoul plays it cool and says they were just talking about how nice the village is, while Alma jumps in to agree that the whole place is super chill and quiet. Luna turns around blushing like crazy, totally agreeing that this place is awesome, and the people here are super nice. Raoul tells her they gotta keep moving, so he just chills with his hands behind his head and starts walking while Alma follows right behind him. Elma realizes Luna truly loves her home and its people, and the boy is super hyped to finally go talk to the locals. The whole crew finally reaches a big 2-story house, and Luna tells them that this is her place. She swings the door open and yells that she's back, then someone starts sprinting until Annie Girl slams into Luna, screaming that her sister is finally home. Luna can't even move before her sister starts laughing like crazy, and then they both smash straight into a tree while Raoul and Alma watch, looking totally freaked out. Luna touches the spot on the tree where she hit it, and her sister is just so hyped to be back, asking if she's doing okay and if her health is all good. Luna's sister asks if she even realizes she's totally lost, admitting she was terrified that Luna would never find her way back home. Luna's sister is so relieved to see her safe that she pulls her into a massive, tight hug. Luna blushes and swears she could have found her way home, but her sister teases that she's actually terrible with directions and only survives because of her super sharp sense of smell. Luna tells the girl to knock it off for ruining her clothes, but her sister just claps back saying they were already gross, so Luna tells her to quit making lame excuses. The moment Alma heard about his sister, it totally clicked that Luna was the oldest kid in the house. Luna says there's something way more important to worry about right now, pointing at Alma and saying he's the one who's gonna fix this mess. Then she gestures to Ra. Luna introduces Sonia to Alma and lets her know that this is her little sister. Alma walks up and tells the girl he's stoked to meet her and is counting on her help. But even though he can tell she likes him back, she's acting totally on. The mustache guy gives a huge thanks to Alma and Raoul for making the long trip all the way to Frandil. The guy introduces himself as Eric and says the woman with him is his wife, Mabel. Eric is Luna's dad and the big boss of this whole territory, and since he and his wife Mabel are actually super chill, they gave Alma and Raoul a massive welcome. But even though, Luna suddenly told her sister that she was the one who invited Alma and Raoul from Talistella, so she better stop making a scene and start being respectful to their guests. Sonia thinks back to what she heard about Talistel, and reminds her sister that she was supposed to be hunting for a super strong guy in the Labastel city dungeon. Sonia starts shaking Luna like crazy, telling her that Talistella is actually a huge trading city. Sonia's totally sure her sister is completely lost, so she asks why she won't even check the map, which is exactly why she told her not to travel alone. Luna says everyone messes up sometimes, and even though Alma thought she was totally done for, he looks at them and thinks Sonia actually seems like the big sister instead of Luna. Sonia catches Alma staring and gets totally flustered, quickly looking away while the guy wonders why she's acting so guarded. Once dinner was over, Alma and Luna's dad headed out to chat with the local farmer. They started asking him everything they could about those monsters. The guy admitted that the monsters have been taking over. The next day in Frandil, Eric took Alma to meet the locals and listen to all their stories. He confirms the locals weren't lying. Monsters have been raiding them for years, and the latest attack happened just a few days ago. Alma knew the soil was total trash for farming, but hey, at least the monsters weren't actually hunting anyone. This drop is wrecking trade, which kills the budget and stops the town from growing, so life here is never gonna get any better. Eric claims he's the big boss of the land, but he's totally failing at killing monsters and growing food, which is making him absolutely furious. Alma can tell right away that this guy is totally obsessed with his work. He might look calm, but he's actually super fired up about fixing every single problem his people have. Since Luna grew up, suddenly the guy gets all on edge, turns to Alma and apologizes because he didn't want to stress him out anymore. The guy is just stoked that Alma and Raoul made the long trip to their village. He tells the kid to slow down and really take in the sights. Right then, Alma realizes that Luna. The guy tries to get another word in, but Luna shuts him down just as Alma spots Sonia heading into the woods, leaving him wondering what she's even doing in there. Alma looks back at Eric and remembers his warning about the monsters getting way more aggressive lately. He says it's totally true and warns that those poisonous lizards are the ones you really gotta watch out for. He says it's finally egg-laying season, so the lizards are hoarding food like crazy, and you definitely don't want to get anywhere near their nests right now. Sonia was trekking through the thick forest. She gripped her fist tight against her chest, looking totally determined. Suddenly, she stopped in front of a massive tree and realized she'd finally found. She checked the wind with her finger, tossed some sleeping flower pollen at the lizards, and they passed out instantly. Sonya weaves past the lizards and finally finds the prize, but since she's all alone without her sister, there's no way she can carry all those eggs by herself. Out of nowhere, one of the lizards snaps awake and starts hissing at the girl, leaving Senate totally shocked that the pollen didn't keep it knocked out for hours like it was supposed to. The lizard jerks its head up and spits right at her, and Sonya's eyes go wide with pure terror. That acid spit slams into the tree and starts melting the bark right off, leaving the lizard totally confused because the girl just vanished into thin air. Elma grabbed Sonya and hauled her up onto a tree branch. He turned back to ask if she was doing okay, but she just let out a massive scream. He figured one lizard was already asleep when Sonya sprayed the pollen, so since its body had slowed down, the stuff didn't even work, and now the girl is just staring at him in total. Alma admits he followed her just because he was curious, and now he's calling her out for going to that lizard nest, making her feel totally embarrassed. Sonya thanked him for the rescue, and then they both leaped off the branch and landed on the ground. Elma turned back and asked why she'd even climb into a nest of poisonous lizards for their eggs, but the girl just said she didn't even want them. Sonya explains that the nest at the lizard's stool is totally packed with all the food they harvested from their fields. He knew monsters were trashing the village's crops, but he didn't think the situation was actually that big of a deal. Elma tells Sonya that if she's just hungry, it'd be way safer to just go hunt a wild animal instead. She starts getting really mad and yells that he's got it all wrong, breaking down in tears as she finally explains why she did it. Sonya explains that if these monsters keep trashing their fields, her dad is totally going to lose his title as lord. Alma and Sonya make it back home, and the girl crashes right next to the bookshelf by her dad's study. Eric was super annoyed that Sonya blabbed about his problems. He slams his hand on the table and spins around. Eric admits he's about to get fired from being Lord. Alma. Eric tells us that Frandol has been skipping out on their tribute for years straight. The guy explains they're forced to send a huge chunk of their food to the capital every single year. But since monsters keep attacking, they barely have enough left to feed their own people. The guy says soldiers from the capital are showing up in 3 days, so the harvest has to be finished fast. And now Alma finally gets why Sonya took such a huge risk. Raoul raises his hand and admits he's a bit lost, but he suggests they just buy the crops from other cities, only for Mabel to tell him they already thought of that. She says they're forced to pay 5,000 harems every year, but the entire harvest only gave them 1,500. She adds that everything needs to be at least B grade, but since the gear and shipping are going to cost a fortune, Raoul is left feeling totally crushed. Eric says they've only got 3 days left and he's totally stuck, thinking he's gonna lose his job and get blamed for messing up someone else's plans. Sonya jumps up and shouts that her dad is totally innocent, and as everyone stares, she gets heated and tells Alma that tons of people have tried to come after them before him. She says her dad totally fell for it when those guys promised to help their village, but they all just ended up ditching them and running away. The girl shouts that the land was already trashed to begin with, but now monsters are totally wrecking the place too. Sonya keeps swearing her dad is innocent and tells Alma that plenty of other people are actually the bad guys, so she doesn't get why he's the only one being blamed for everything. Eric walks up and pats her head to thank her, feeling so proud that she's grown into someone who can get angry for him when he can't do it himself. Eric reminds them that he's the leader and the one who chose to trust those people. He knows he has to take the blame for what happened, but Sonya just doesn't see it that. Luna looks at her family with total regret, wishing she could just jump back in time to save them. Alma knows he needs 3,500 more harem harvest points, and the storage is bone dry, but he's determined to bring the smiles back to his family's faces. Eric tells Alma they can't give the kid a real reward, so he's not going to try and talk him into it, but he still hopes she'll share her wisdom with the new lord and the villagers. Eric blames himself for the village being poor instead of the people, and Alma is totally shocked that he's still putting his citizens first. Alma smiles and promises to give it his all, and even though Eric asks if he's actually serious, he's just relieved the kingdom will be safe long after he's gone. Alma says she's not just going to sit around and wait for men to finally lose their spots as lords of the land. He thinks that helping everyone out is actually just him being totally selfish. Eric's eyes go wide when he sees the kid cracking open his vault, and he demands to know what Alma is actually planning. Alma wants Eric to stay the lord, so he's going to grind out those 3,500 missing crops in just 3 days. But he's still wondering how high the quality needs to be. Raoul puts a hand on the kid's shoulder to steady him, while Luna clutches her shirt and looks at him like he's a total legend. Meanwhile, inside the castle, 2 guys are busy planning for the capital's squad that's about to roll in. This long-haired dude marched right up to Mr. Julius to complain, totally clueless about why he was stuck with such a brutal mission. The guy steps up and reminds them his squad has always been loyal, but he calls out this new mission for being totally reckless, and begs them to think about the innocent people who'll get hurt. Julius shuts the guy down and explains that the country is basically one big living thing, so they have to cut off the useless land to keep it alive or the whole place is toast. The guy realizes talking to Julius is a total waste of time, so he snaps his fingers and a bunch of armored mercenaries spawn right behind him. They all drop into their battle stances, ready to scrap. One of the mercs starts getting cold feet, but the leader just raises his sword and tells him it's way too late to worry about being a good guy before turning to Julius and telling him to. In just a few minutes, the whole mercenary squad and their boss were frozen solid in ice, because Julius is the kingdom's top mage and taking them down was a total piece of cake. Julius calls the mercenaries greedy criminals for stealing cash and dodging taxes, so he tells his knights to take them out, and they follow his orders without a second thought. Julius turns to Sir Edward to see if they're finally done, but the man just hangs his head and says there's one more thing. They seriously need to talk about Frandles. Julius and Edward are heading down the hall when Julius asks if they can finally talk about the drama in Frandle. Edward says the harvest delivery is coming up fast, and since that place is way out in the middle of nowhere, it takes forever to get everything ready. Julius takes a second to think before telling Sir Edward to stick to the plan, since this wasteland is right on the Western Kingdom's border and is way too important to lose. Julius is dead set on taking total control of that land, no matter what happens. Julius tells Edward to take out the Lord if he starts causing trouble, giving him the green light to go wild on everything else, and Edward gets right to work. The next day, Edward rolls into Frandle with an appraiser named Cedric, who basically says the whole place is just your average border town. Eric steps out to meet Cedric and Edward, giving a polite bow and saying he's totally hyped to have guests over. Edward is totally shocked the Lord actually came out to meet them in person. Eric points over to his massive estate and tells everyone to just make themselves at home. Edward notices right away that Eric is acting super chill. He knew their harvest numbers had been trash for a long time, so he's convinced Eric just stuffed the boxes with rotten junk to fake a full load. Eric leads the group over to the harvest crates, and the second they get a good look, Edward's eyes go wide in total shock. Eric points at the crates and reveals there are a massive 5,000 units of harvest packed inside. Edward was completely floored and trying to wrap his head around the situation when Eric suddenly mentioned a tiny catch. The boxes had a few B-rank fruits, but they were actually mostly high-level A ranks, and he asked Edward if he was cool with that. Edward thinks this is total garbage, but Cedric checks the harvest and tells him Eric isn't lying, making it clear there's no doubt about it. Cedric says this harvest is top-tier quality, and the appraiser is totally blown away because he's never seen anything this perfect in his entire career. Edward's still tripping because he knows Frandle was way too broke to afford the gear for a harvest like this, and he's dying to know how they actually pulled it off. Since Cedric is a researcher, he's dying to know the secret behind how they grew such an insane harvest. Eric points over to Elma and says he's the guy with all the answers, so Elma steps forward and tells Edward he's stoked to finally meet him. He introduces himself as a relative and tells Edward he can just call him Elma. Edward realizes that name belongs to a big-shot noble family from the Eastern Empire, and Eric points out that Elma is actually the advisor for this whole settlement. Elma tells Cedric and Edward to follow him, since he knows Edward is dying to check out every single one of their fields. Elma leads Cedric and Edward right into the middle of the harvest fields. Edward can tell immediately that the soil is super rich and healthy. Cedric is blown away that the ground isn't totally dried out after growing such a huge amount of food. Alma says they planted these beds just this morning, and Edward and Cedric are totally losing it because they think that's actually impossible. Cedric asks if he's for real. Did that seed actually grow into a full crop in less than a single day? Alma pops open his vault and reveals he used a super important item to survive the landing. Cedric's jaw drops when he realizes he's holding the god of fertility's legendary fertilizer, a gift straight from the heavens that lets him control exactly how fast and how perfect his crops grow. This guy explains that mixing this fertilizer into the dirt makes any crop grow at super speed. Cedric starts shaking Alma by the shoulders, demanding to know where she got something so pricey, while Alma just looks at him totally confused and asks how that thing could even be worth anything. Cedric says he's only ever read about this stuff in books, but for Alma, the whole thing is starting to ring a bell. Cedric drops the news that his fertilizer will keep the fields blooming for 100 years straight, and the farmers are left standing there with their jaws on the floor. Raoul walks over and is blown away that Alma is actually a pro farmer, but Alma just gives a smirk and says he just had the item lying around. Cedric points at the rocks sitting in the beds and asks what they are, thinking they're just totally normal stones. Alma explains that magic crystals are basically just pure magic power squeezed into a solid rock. He says that way back in the day, this magic crystal was actually called the Stone of the Gods and was used for all kinds of crazy rituals. Alma thinks a fancy scientist should already know this, but he still reminds him that the soil needs the right nutrients for any of these crops to survive. Most of this stuff comes straight from the Earth's magical essence. This essence is basically tiny mana particles hidden inside every single object. You can find it everywhere, from the dirt on the ground to the air you breathe. Elma explains that essence hops from item to item, and the more there is, the better the harvest gets. So Elma scattered magic crystals all over the field to crank that energy way up. Raoul tries to act all shocked, but Sonia turns to him and says he's definitely heard this one before. Cedric covers his mouth in total shock because he can't believe they actually used a move like that. He's completely blown away by Alma's big brain, and Edward remembers that magic is usually super weak in the air and ground, so there's no way it should be turning into crystals naturally. He also heard that back in the Age of Adventurers, these same crystals were hidden deep inside dungeons crawling with super aggressive monsters. He knows these things are way too rare to just use for regular farming, so he asks the guy where he even found those magic crystals. Elma knows he can't admit he swiped these from the dungeon he was guarding to level up, so he lies and says they're just old family treasures. He had no clue this thing was actually a treasure. Now he finally gets why his crops are growing like crazy and look better than ever. He thinks it's super sketchy that the village is so empty, since there's no way this tiny group could have harvested all these crops so fast. Edward asks if Elma hired any extra help, but the guy says he didn't bring anyone else on. Elma realizes Edward is a total genius, and knows he definitely earned that high-ranking spot in the capital. Elma explains he stayed hidden from the creatures that helped them because he was worried the man would totally freak out. Edward asks what she means, but Elma just whistles, and Edward's jaw drops when he sees a pack of monsters charging straight for the fields. Elma tells him these are the same monsters that wrecked the fields, but now they're totally under control and working for food. Edward's totally confused, but Elma points right at the devil carving and says that's exactly why the monsters are doing whatever he says. This creepy wall carving showed a demon king who had totally crushed and taken over a massive army of monsters. The carving of his face pumped out insane magic energy that lured monsters in and forced them to obey him. Edward asks if this stone can actually keep the monsters from attacking people. Elma explains that most monsters nearby are totally helpless against the stone, but he knows Fenrir is special since she's the only one who can resist it. Raoul makes a monster leap through a ring of fire, throwing his arms out and bragging that these beasts can even pull off stunts like this. Edward's jaw drops as he watches these monsters pull off moves that should be totally impossible. He was totally freaked out that the creepy carving was actually from the demon world, since those stuck-up monsters would never just hand over their treasures to a human. He's totally confused how this rare treasure ended up in the middle of nowhere in the hands of a guy and a kid like that. Elma knows this is a lot to handle, but he keeps insisting the monsters are totally under his thumb, which seriously freaks Edward out and makes him wonder who this kid actually is. Cedric wipes his tears and says this is insane, totally blown away that Elma actually figured out how to tame monsters and put them to work. Cedric thinks this is the perfect fix for those quiet border towns where hardly anyone lives. Elma looks at Cedric and wonders if every single appraiser is this much of a softie. Cedric turns to Edward to see what he thinks, and Edward totally agrees that Frandl went from a boring border town to a whole new world in just a few days. Edward knows he's got to report this to his boss right away. Sonia walks up to ask if her dad is still the boss, but Cedric tells her not to sweat it because he's going to use his appraiser powers to make their land The guy promises that if everything goes right, they'll get way more money for the land, so Cedric and Edward hop into their carriage and head back. Raoul is hyped they pulled it off, and Alma's just as stoked, so he tells the guy that Eric is a solid dude too. Eric is totally losing it, breaking down in tears as he admits he was ready to ditch his post and his people just days ago, and he gives Alma a huge thank you for everything. Sonia walks up to the guy and tells him Alma is a total beast, completely shocked that he flipped the script in just 3 days. Luna jumps in and says Alma is just built different, but Sonia has no clue what her sister is even talking about. Luna turns to her sister and says Alma is totally different from the others who came to help, so Sonia lets go of his head and agrees. Everything was going way too perfectly for Alma, and it was honestly starting to creep him out. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd totally messed something up. While they're riding in the carriage, Cedric tells Edward that Frandl is basically one of a kind. He honestly didn't think this place would be so advanced until he saw it for himself. It's been a week since Edward and Cedric headed out, and the village is looking crazy different now that Alma and her monster squad fixed up all the roads and houses. Alma and Luna heard some barking, and when the boy looked down, he spotted a tiny wolf cub. He hauled the cart over and scored a sweet reward from his grandma. Alma notices that even though everyone was terrified of the monsters at first, they're already acting like it's totally normal. Elma walks up to the old man and fires up her vault, letting him use it to water all his crops. The old man turns to Alma and asks if he can seriously just take all the water he wants from the storage tank. Alma shuts that down and explains that his storage space is tied directly to his mana, so it's actually limited. Out of nowhere, he hears someone shout that it's totally unfair, and when he spins around, he sees Luna standing right there. Luna gives Alma a massive death stare, complaining that her whole body was aching from hauling water while Alma just cheated with magic she doesn't even understand. Sonya steps up and tells everyone it's not Alma's fault Luna is so weak, reminding them that she's the one who chose to stay locked in her room 24/7 anyway. Luna claims she was just doing some deep magic research, but Sonya shuts her down, asking if that's why she's totally powerless and can't even find her way home. Raoul tried to get everyone to chill out, but even he had to admit that Alma's magic was a total scam. The guy thought about it for a second, then turned to Luna and... Luna leads Alma into her room and heads for the bed, but Alma's eyes immediately land on the massive stacks of books covering the walls. Luna gets super embarrassed and tries to explain herself, but Alma starts explaining that to really master the storage, you've got to remember two super important rules. First, the mana has to hit at least 1,000 units, and then Luna needs to master that spatial teleport spell. Luna knows her mana is about to level up, but since she's only at 600 right now, she's got to find a way to add another 400 units first. Luna turns to leave, saying she's got to head into the forest to take out some monsters, but Alma stops her right there. He's positive this will take way too long and suggests a detour, but she has no idea what that even means. He reaches into his inventory and pulls out a legendary golden apple from the sacred arena. This fruit gives you a massive mana boost, and he tells Luna that if she eats it, her power will. Luna asks if she can actually eat it, so the guy asks if she's just embarrassed by the golden apple, and tells her they'll need a backup plan if she refuses to take a bite. Luna grabs the apple and tells him she totally trusts him, then takes a huge bite and says it's delicious, scarfing it down because it's so sweet and juicy. She says that sweet and sour mix is a total masterpiece on your tongue, and Alma knows exactly what Luna means because he's tasted those apples too. Alma remembered the golden apple could boost mana to a crazy 2,500 units, and looking at the girl, he was way too intimidated to even try stopping her. Luna raises her hand and says she feels a crazy new power waking up inside her, and the guy is totally hyped, explaining that her mana is finally starting to skyrocket. Luna walks right up and asks for another apple, but her creepy new attitude totally freaks the guy out, so he tells her she'll have to wait to eat it. Alma gives the green light to step onto the teleporter, but Luna wonders if it's the same one that boy used. She starts talking about a book she read on teleporting, explaining that it's actually a lost form of spatial magic that doesn't even exist in their world anymore. She was low-key freaking out because spatial magic is super rare and insanely hard to master. Alma realizes books can totally lie to you, and the real struggle of getting strong is just finding info that's actually legit. Alma says the first step to using spatial magic is being totally aware of every single inch of the space around you. He reminds them that teleportation is basically just a spell that zaps magical beings from one spot to another. She hangs on his every word and asks if this is why Alma said they need a spot connected to the moon, and he tells her she's exactly right. Alma explains that by moving your magic, you basically fold space until the distance between two spots hits 0. Then everything just snaps back to normal. Alma explains that the whole secret to the spell is just moving between two spots in the blink of an eye. Alma thinks the absolute key to teleporting is just being able to picture the whole movement in your head. She starts waving her hands around, shouting that she totally gets it. Her brain was basically melting from all that info. She promises the guy that she's got everything under control. Elma gives Luna. Luna looks up and asks him to show her how it's done, but Alma says they should find a better spot first. He shifts around and asks if she remembers, so Luna tells him to move again, and he actually does it. Sonya walks in to say the tea is ready and tells Alma and Luna they should finally take a break together. Alma was pacing back and forth nervously, begging the girl to lead him to Luna's room, while Sanya stood there wondering what the heck was even going on. Alma plops down at the table and starts sipping some tea. He asks Luna if she's actually making any progress yet. He tells her it's totally fine if she doesn't get it. The guy sips his tea and tells Luna she's got a real knack for magic, promising her she'll totally nail those moves with just a bit more practice. Alma remembers his past life and how he spent forever mastering this spell, and after he explains that patience is the real secret, Luna says she totally gets it. The girl actually pulls off the teleport, leaving Alma totally stunned while Luna asks if she really did it. Alma was totally shocked that the girl mastered teleporting after seeing it done just one single time. Alma looked at Luna and realized that her magic sense plus those sage skills would make her a seriously dangerous mage one day. He hands her some tea and says they're hitting the storage next, but she also needs to practice teleporting since he's sure she'll master it super fast. Luna was totally hyped about what just went down. Alma caught her blushing like crazy. He thought it was super adorable how much she geeks out over magic. Alma realizes Luna is a total prodigy who's already outclassing her. But then Luna drops a bombshell. She's been secretly practicing magic since way before she even got her skill. Luna explains that her great-grandpa was a legendary wizard who left a massive collection of magic books at home, and she's been hooked on reading them since she was little. Alma calls her out for still being head over heels, and Luna just looks away with a huge blush on her face. Luna says her family used to live in the capital, but her dad was totally over the nobles fighting all the time, so they moved to their old family land to keep everyone safe. Hearing about all these noble feuds makes Alma think back to his own family, and he finally realizes that Luna's people were going through some serious drama too. Luna explains how the locals were actually super nice and welcomed them with open arms. They even teamed up to build them a house so they wouldn't be stuck sleeping outside. Plus, Luna wanted to pay everyone back for their kindness, so she thanked Alma, the leader of Olatacha, and smiled because her new storage skill meant she could finally do so much more. Luna's always calling him a cheater, but Alma thinks her smile is the real cheat code. Alma knows that once the town is fixed and Luna masters her magic, she'll be able to handle any problem totally on her own. Alma's feeling pretty sad, but he knows it's for the best, so the villagers finally learn to stop relying on him for everything. Suddenly, a massive crash echoes through the room, making the boy whip around as Luna panics and asks what happened. And once Alma points out the sound came from outside, they all decide to. Alma walks up to Luna's sister to ask what's happening, but just as Sonia starts to explain, she gets totally cut off. The knights told Eric, the Lord of Frandal, to just come quietly, but he was totally lost and had no idea why they were even trying to arrest him. The knights told the guy he was busted for using monsters for himself, and everyone just stared at them in total shock. One of the knights orders the guy to head to the capital right now to stand trial for being a traitor. It's been 3 whole days since Mr. Eric was hauled off to the capital. Alma, Luna, and Raoul were busy making sure all the monsters got fed. Sonia was also right. Alma suddenly walks up to tell her everything's gonna be okay, and when she turns around, she sees a bunch of wolf cubs jumping all over him. Alma's sure Eerie already reported the chaos, so he thinks the knights are just there to get the facts straight. Sonia swears her dad is innocent, so Alma tells her that Eric just needs to stand his ground to make everything work out. Sonia totally agrees with him, knowing she has to step up and protect their home while her dad is away. Sonia slaps her cheeks to get hyped, making her friends smile as Raoul finally breathes a sigh of relief that her 3-day funk is over. But Sonia just gets totally annoyed at him. Right then, Alma hears someone talking about wounds, and when he spins around, he sees a guy with shredded clothes and a face that's totally beat up. The settlers asked what happened, and he told them the king's knights jumped him in the woods, probably because they're trying to steal the land while Lord Eric is gone. Alma realized his gut feeling was spot on, and now he's seriously stressed about those knights popping up in the forest. Alma checks the guy out and remembers he blamed knights for the attack, but the wounds don't look like sword cuts at all. They look like they're from nails, and he even spots some weird powder on the man's clothes. The guy begs one of the settlers for help, telling them his wife and daughter are still stuck out in the forest. Elma's totally down and says she, Raoul, and Luna are heading into the woods to see what's up, while the guy tells Sonia to patch up the injured man, and she promises to give it her all. As Alma, Raoul, and Luna trek through the forest, the boy tells them that what they saw was probably just a total illusion. Ro asks what kind of crazy illusion this is, and Alma explains that a monster is using a powder to make him see his absolute worst fears. Alma realizes the locals are totally freaked out about royal soldiers marching into their town. Alma's totally confused why this guy would drag his whole family into a forest full of monsters just to pick a fight. Raoul tells Alma they found the guy's mom and daughter, but Cocoon is just hanging there from a tree branch. Luna warns him that knights are showing up too, and Raoul gets ready to fight, asking if this is all just a crazy hallucination. Alma screams for Raoul to watch his right, and he barely manages to block the hit as Fenrir lunges at him. Raoul stares at the she-wolf in total shock, having no clue why she's suddenly lunging at him. Raoul wonders if he's just seeing things again, but Alma asks if he and Luna are still just totally terrified of the wolf. Raoul asks if these illusions can actually hurt him, and Alma tells him they definitely can. Raoul and Alma spot some glowing magic stones on the ground, and Alma realizes the enemy is using illusions to hide their real attack. Raoul grips his sword again and asks if they can just blow off these attacks, but Alma makes it clear. They're gonna have to fight. He looks ahead and totally freaks out when he spots his own dad standing right there with the knights. Alma is blown away by how this powder actually brings a person's deepest fears to life. Luna squared up for the fight. Raoul stepped in right beside her to back her up, and he straight up dared them to come at him. Raoul started blocking every hit with his sword, Luna began blasting them with magic, and Alma jumped right into the fight too. Alma realized the fake couldn't copy the real guy's skills, so he decided to fire up his research magic. He figured the enemy was totally hidden, but with that magic sensor, Alma was still gonna track him down. Alma finds the bad guy and drops her strongest wind magic, Super Hurricane. The giant storm straight up blows away every single illusion. Raul Luna is totally shocked by how crazy strong Alma is. Alma yells for Raul to look up, and he spots a creepy humanoid bug monster lunging right at him. Raul leaps into the air to strike the beast. Luna shuts her eyes to let her magic fly, and Alma spots Raul sticking the landing right on a tree branch. Raul, Luna, and Alma manage to rescue the mother and daughter of that guy who got hurt in the woods and brought them back home. Raul was stoked it was finally over, but Alma got super serious and told him they were just getting started. The kid turns to the man and asks if the three of them are actually serious about escaping Frandl, wanting to make sure he's got it right. The guy's eyes pop in shock, and Sonya and Luna whip their heads around to see him hanging his head as he suddenly gets super bummed out. Luna asks what's happening, and Alma explains that the family chose a deadly forest over the safe path, something he realized the moment he saw royal knights in the illusions. The guy claims the great sage Julius is the one behind all this mess. Luna hangs on his every word. He reveals that Julius was the person who framed Mr. Eric for treason. Alma asks who this Julius guy is, and the man explains he's the kingdom's top magician, with power that's basically on the same level as the king. Julius is a totally heartless prime minister who crushes anyone that even thinks about messing with the country. The guy explains that Julius just chopped off a corrupt lord's head for taking bribes, and then crushed a whole rebellion in only 2 days. Sonya clutches her chest and turns around to find her sister staring at the floor, looking totally heartbroken. The guy tells Alma that since he's not from around here, he probably won't get it, but he's terrified of what'll happen to his family once the soldiers roll into town. The guy admits he always knew using monsters was a bad move, and Alma is just staring at him in total shock. Sonya totally loses it and starts yelling at the guy, calling him out for staying quiet when things were going well. But now that they're in trouble, he's throwing Alma under the bus. Alma turns around to try and chill Sonya out, but she keeps going and asks if he remembers what his dad told him. Sonya reminds them that trusting someone is his own responsibility, and the settlers just stare at her in dead silence. Alma walks up to thank her, and the guy promises her that he's doing totally fine. Sonya tries to speak up, but the guy cuts her off and says everyone is just plain scared. Alma figured if that guy was legit, he'd have to rush to the capital to clear Mr. Eric's name. But he knew he couldn't just ditch the village while it was still. Alma starts by calming everyone down, putting his hand over his heart and admitting this mess is on him. But he swears that if an army shows up, he won't let anyone touch them. The kid asks the villagers to give him a moment, and they all just stand there in total silence with their heads bowed. Raul walks up to Alma and asks what his game plan is, wondering if he's actually crazy enough to take on a whole army by himself. Alma looks up and says they need to build a solid defense just to get everyone to chill out. Raul asks how they're gonna pull it off, but Alma tells him to relax since he's already got a few ideas ready to go. Alma heads out, saying he's gonna be gone for a bit, and tells Raul and Luna to hold down the fort. But before Raul can even say a word, Alma's already gone while the girls just watch him leave. Edward finally reached the kingdom and met with the great sage to spill everything about the magic items Alma showed off during the harvest assessment. Edward was sure that the god-tier fertilizer, magic crystals, and the devil's relief were way too valuable for just a basic border lord to have. This guy was convinced Alma was part of the Empire and was packing some crazy demon relics. Edward's convinced that Frandl is making secret deals with the Empire, or maybe even a high-ranking demon. Julius tells Edward to chill and not jump to conclusions, so Edward agrees but asks what they're doing with Eric since he didn't even fight back and keeps saying he's innocent. Julius wondered if Eric was actually Lord Frandl, then told Edward to give him whatever he needed since he's their bait. Edward asks if Eric is really just bait, and Julius confirms it, saying they've only got one final move left to pull off. It was the middle of the night and everyone was totally knocked out, but Luna had already managed to sneak out of the estate. Luna was sneaking out in the middle of the night when a guy's voice suddenly caught her off guard, asking where she was headed so late. But when she spun around, she saw her sister. Luna was totally shocked when her sister and Raul suddenly showed up. She was sure they were already knocked out in their beds. Sonya told her straight up that they weren't even asleep. Sonya noticed her sister was acting totally weird, especially since Luna got super depressed the second she heard that mage's name, making Sonya think she was just shutting everyone out. Luna tenses up and looks down, making Sonya realize she's trying to take on Julius all by herself with some totally reckless plan. Out of nowhere, Luna just bolts and starts sprinting. Sonya and Raul scramble to chase after her. Sonya screams out, asking why she's even running, She stays right on her sisters. Luna stops at a small house, and as Raoul and Sonia catch up, Raoul starts roasting her for having absolutely no stamina. Luna looks up and tells him she's only met Julius one time, way back at her gift ceremony. She thinks back to the priest telling her she's got the sage's gift. She was totally stoked in that moment. Everyone around her started losing their minds and cheering. Luna remembers Julius suddenly popping up behind her, and her eyes go wide as he finally tells her his name. Everyone in the crowd knew right away that this was the legendary sage. Julius told the girl that she was actually hiding some insane talent deep inside. She just stared at him, waiting to see what. Luna's heading straight for the capital right now because she's convinced it's the only way to save her dad. Sonia asks what's going on, wondering if Luna really thinks her dad is going to be happy about a rescue like this. Luna looks down and says she's got this, telling Raoul and Sonia to stay out of her way as she suddenly blasts off a ball lightning spell. Sonia realizes the girl blasted a ball of lightning into the dirt to blind them, so she screams at Raoul to get moving. Suddenly, the guy is right next to the moon. He's locked in a fighting stance and ready to go. Raoul realizes she's trying to blind them, but he can still hear. Luna tells Dork she's super sorry. She promises to help him fix this whole mess as soon as she gets back. Raoul is just standing there, totally confused by what she's saying. The moon spins around and kicks the house into pieces, burying the guy under a pile of bricks as he hits the ground, totally wrecked. Luna bails for the capital, and when her sister points out she knew the roof was trash, Raoul realizes she's totally using her knowledge of the area to stay one step ahead. Luna stared at the gate, totally ready to sneak out and explore the world. But out of nowhere, a bag of seeds came flying straight at her. These weren't just any seeds. Luna spins around and spots Raoul, while Sonia catches up to tell her the girl is totally cornered with nowhere to hide in these trees. Sonia tells us Luna to just quit and wait for Elma to finally get back. Luna's face drops as she remembers something huge, and she tells everyone they've got no choice but to wait for Elma. Sonia's totally confused and asks what's going on, but Luna just tells her she's got Elma to thank for everything. Luna tells her sister the village is all hers now, then she hits the teleporter and vanishes in a flash. Sonia knows right away she's using magic again, which is wild since Luna could barely move an inch back during Elma's lessons. One line out. The input was one block of text. I will provide one block of text. Let's try to make it more punchy, dynamic. Sonia looks down and sighs that her sister hasn't changed one bit. Raoul is confused and asks what she's talking about. Sonia looks up and explains that once Luna makes a choice, Sonia remembers Luna saying they could trust Mr. Elma, but she still ends up giving her sister a total earful. Edward was still hanging back in the office with Julius, and they were busy mapping out their next big move. Julius grabs the magic stone and asks for the name of the guy who saved the village. Edward asks if he's talking about the kid who gave the border lord all those rare treasures. Then he remembers the name is Alma and drops his full name. The next morning, Alma finally spotted Fenrir. She was just standing there right on the edge of a massive cliff. The guy said the wolf was still doing an insane job of staying hidden. Fenrir turns around and complains that he barely ever visits, but Alma just agrees and says he's finally found a way for her to pay him back. Fenrir watches Alma closely to see what he'll do next, and with a big smirk, Alma asks the she-wolf to throw down. Fenrir asked if she really had to fight, and the boy told her yeah. She'd have to go all out and act like her life was on the line. Fenrir says he doesn't see the point in any of this, so the boy just stares at the she-wolf and waits for her to keep talking. Fenrir looks away and sighs, admitting she totally owes Alma a favor, but she thinks a fight to the death is just way too much. The she-wolf says her son's been missing since this morning and tells the boy he's just gonna have to come back later. Alma says sorry, then looks up and says he's out of options, while Fenrir watches him like he's totally up to something. Right then, a huge rock falls from the mountain. The boy starts firing off his magic. Fenrir yells at him, asking what he's doing. She knows he's not an idiot, and Alma reveals Mr. Eric was taken to the capital, and since the she-wolf lives right next to the humans, he's sure she's already heard the whole scoop. Fenrir backs him up, saying she heard the rumors that Eric was accused of gathering a monster army for the rebellion. Alma hangs her head and tells him it's his own fault he got caught. But he's totally sure she's the key to proving he's innocent, and has been racking his brain for. He decides to take a super rare baby monster all the way to the capital, and gift it to the king to prove he's totally loyal. The wolf tenses up and demands to know how he could take her cub. But the boy just holds out his arms and says he's only looking at the options, asking if that's. The she-wolf says she's getting way too old, and while Alma thinks he misheard her, she repeats that she's losing her touch since she didn't even notice how evil that kid's heart really was. Fenrir vanishes into thin air, and while Alma's looking everywhere for the wolf, she suddenly strikes from behind, kicking up so much dust that you can't see a thing. When the dust clears, the wolf sees Alma isn't even hurt, and she's totally losing it because she definitely caught him by surprise. Alma combined her search and defense magic to throw up a massive magical barrier. Then he unleashes his strongest wind spell, Storm Summoning. That storm left a massive trail of wreckage behind. Right then, everything finally makes sense to Alma. He realizes the wolf is actually... He was sure he'd land a hit, but she totally dodged him by hopping from one shadow to the next. Right then she realizes that Alma's mana is absolutely insane. Fenrir sizes up her power against Alma's and realizes she'd get totally wrecked in a head-on fight, admitting this kid is actually a beast at magic. Alma tried to guess the wolf's next move, but Fenrir suddenly triggered his Shadow Eater spell, and tiny shadow beasts started popping out of the dark. Suddenly, a shadow beast pops up right behind the guy and tries to smash him, but his barrier stops it cold. Alma dodged the attack, and the guy started panicking because he had no clue which shadow the beast would jump out of next. While those shadow beasts kept him busy, a she-wolf suddenly lunged in to join the fight. He quickly realized this wolf was way smarter and more cautious than he expected. She didn't even... Alma watched the wolf closely, trying to guess its next move, while relying on the magic shield he invented by mixing search and defense spells. This insane barrier tracks enemies, calculates damage, and even predicts where they'll strike next, but it's super complicated and eats up a ton of mana. One-line out rule. The input has 3 sentences. If I output one sentence, I follow the one-line out rule. Final choice? Alma knew his. Alma realized the she-wolf was just trying to exhaust him to buy time, so he had to find a way to get the upper hand back fast. Alma activated his physical buff magic, cranking his strength, speed, and reflexes to the absolute max. The wolf was totally blown away as the kid started stacking every buff imaginable, from insane speed and dodging to super tough defense and ultra-sharp senses. The she-wolf was totally blown away that this guy could pull off so many physical power-up spells all at the same time. One of the shadow beasts lunged straight for Alma, but he managed to fight the monster off. The rest of the shadow beasts lunged at him all at once, but he totally shut them down and wrecked every single one. Alma turns to the wolf and asks if it's finally time for her to jump into the scrap, but he tells her she needs to prove she's actually serious, so she just asks if he... The wolf girl realized this guy was built different after he totally wrecked her shadow army without even breaking a sweat. Fenrir had finally bought enough time, and even though Alma was totally confused, he turned around to see the sun was already disappearing past the horizon. Right then, the she-wolf flashes a wicked grin and says her kingdom is finally about to take over. Legends say that when the world finally ends, Fenrir is the one who's gonna swallow the sun and moon to rule over the darkness. The kid felt Fenrir closing in, but then his shield got slammed so fast he didn't even see the attack coming. Alma realized speed didn't even matter because Fenrir was just slipping through the shadows to get close. This was an attack you literally couldn't dodge. This was Fenrir's... Alma bolts for it, but Fenrir screams that running is pointless as she starts closing the gap. Alma blasts Fenrir with a blinding flash of light magic. He shouts out his spell, Extending Radiance, to try and stop her, but Fenrir doesn't even blink and shrugs. Out of nowhere, Alma spins around and throws a massive swing. Fenrir is totally lost and has no clue what's going on. The kid pulls out his ultimate earth magic, a crazy volcanic. Fenrir lunges at the guy, making Alma's barrier start to shatter, but he just blocks with his arms and charges right back in while the she-wolf tells him he's... Fenrir zips through the shadows to dodge every strike and asks Alma if he realizes all his hard work is basically for nothing. The kid spins around, crosses his arms, and uses his wind magic to pull off an air jump. Alma flies into the air, but the wolf just glares and calls him a total moron, asking if he seriously thinks he's safe up there when she controls every bit of darkness in the world. The she-wolf tells Alma he's totally done for, and she's gonna keep hitting him until he finally spills where her sun is. Alma waits for the perfect split second and shouts that something just opened up, staring at him in total shock as she asks what's even going on. Alma points a finger at Fenrir and gives her a cocky smirk. There's no way he'd pick a fight he wasn't 100% sure he'd... Alma says he's got a ton of reasons why he needs to wrap this fight up fast. The wolf thinks this is a total joke since the sun is already gone, but then she notices the sun is actually starting to move. The she-wolf notices something's totally wrong with Madoki Peak, a massive monster that pretends to be a mountain to trick lost travelers into walking right into its mouth. Fenrir realizes that mountain is actually just a monster Alma summoned, and she starts to wonder if Alma had this whole trap planned out from the start. It finally clicks. Alma was totally faking his emotions just to lure her right out into the open. The wolf tried to bolt back into the shadows, but Alma cut her off, telling her there was no way to run while she was stuck in midair. The kid thrusts his hand out and triggers his sealing magic, trapping Fenrir in immobile chains that send the wolf crashing to the dirt. Fenrir finally admits she lost, and even though she knows she's got no right to ask, she begs Amma to choose her over his own son. Just then, the wolf cub speaks up, totally impressed that Amma took down his mom, the Mountain Queen. He waves his paw and shouts that the kid's strength is basically on the same level as a monster. Fenrir's eyes go wide as she demands to know what's happening, just as the rest of the monsters start crawling out of the trees. Fenrir realizes all the other monsters were watching the whole fight. Then Alma tells him that since he lost, the title of Mountain King belongs to him now, leaving the giant wolf totally confused about what that even means. Fenrir asks if Alma really did all this for the kid, so Alma explains he heard Fenrir is the mountain's big boss, and tells him to lay low while the wolf cub totally loves the fight. Fenrir asks why Alma went through all this trouble, and she explains he could have just used his right to ask, but that would have forced him to spend way too much time proving. Alma says the only way to get respect is to take down the current ruler, and he thinks it's the fastest way to the top. Fenrir thinks back to Alma's plan to bring the wolf cup to the king, but she knows the kid was just pushing her buttons, and Fenrir honestly has no idea what's going on in that boy's head. Alma bows low to Fenrir and apologizes, admitting he was so desperate for power to protect his home that he actually started doubting the wolf's feelings. Alma knows he hasn't earned a pass yet, so he's gonna make things right later, but until then, he's ready to take every bit of Fenrir's pure rage. Fenrir is totally massive, and seeing Alma struggle with him makes her wonder what she's even supposed to do with the guy. Elmo looks up totally confused, but Fenrir tells him he just showed every monster in the forest how strong he is, so he definitely shouldn't be bowing like that. She talks the kid into being a leader everyone can look up to, and Alma is just standing there, totally blown away by the she-wolf. Fenrir smirks because she knew she was right about him all along, and she officially names Alma the Lord of the Mountains. On smiles at the she-wolf and thanks her, confirming that everything is finally ready to go. The wolf turns to Alma and says she needs a favor, so Alma asks her what it is. The wolf asks the kid to give them all names, but Alma's like, why do monsters even need names anyway? Fenrir demands the boy give her and her son names, since they're his servants now and need a symbol to prove it. She says this is her big request, and after looking at the wolf like it's crazy at first, Alma finally smiles and agrees, though he warns her that he's actually trash it. It's been 2 days since Luna left Frandl, but Alma still hasn't come back and there's zero sign of the army yet. Raoul and Sonia were just chilling by the gate, but when he saw how totally bummed out she was, he closed his eyes and just wished Alma would come back already. Suddenly, Alma calls out and says sorry for being late, and the boy spins around, totally hyped to see his buddy again. He totally freaks out when he sees the guy's body hanging right out of a she-wolf's mouth. Once the astro hit, he figured the she-wolf had actually taken Alma down after all. Sonia stared at Alma and that she-wolf, looking completely terrified. Then, Alma turned around and told Raoul and Sonia to take a way closer look at him. The two of them did exactly. Out of nowhere, a wolf cub leaps out and reveals how Alma fought his mom and totally won. Wolf cub says Alma is the king of these mountains and forests now, and every single monster does exactly what he says. Raoul is losing his mind because there's no way the wolf lost to Alma, so he looks at the kid and says this whole thing feels super sketchy. Raoul suddenly realizes he could actually understand everything the wolf cubs were saying, so he asks how that's even possible. Alma explains that giving the she-wolf and her son's second names totally supercharged their telepathy, so Raoul asks what names he actually picked. Alma explains that monsters with second names are super rare, and they're way stronger and smarter than the regular ones. He explains that by using a naming spell, you can actually force a monster to take on a second name. Raoul walks up to pet the boar and points out that if you look closely, you can tell the boars and wolves have definitely changed. Emma says this one boar is enough to take down the adventurer B-Ring, and Raoul is totally freaking out. Alma throws his arms wide and admits he's totally drained from naming every single monster in the forest, but the wolf points out that even he can run out of mana. Raoul is totally shocked that Alma actually named every single monster in the forest. Alma casually mentions there are 30,000 monsters out there. He's going to leave 564 of. Alma explains that since he named every single monster, he can track their location and see exactly what they're doing from anywhere at any time. Raoul was still blown away by how many monsters were in the forest, thinking he'd finally seen it all. Al-Levin says the real question is if the villagers can even trust these monsters, especially since they're the ones who started this whole mess. The villagers walk up and tell Alma she's got nothing to worry about, but she notices they're all holding weapons and literally wearing kitchen plates as armor. The guy in front says he's been stuck on Masani's words for days, especially the part about them being to blame too. The guy tells Mr. Alma that the whole village is ready to fight, promising they'll hold off the royal army and protect their home until Mr. Eric gets back. which totally shocks Alma in. Raoul leans back with his hands behind his head and gives the girl props for her hard work, totally shocked that her speech fired up the villagers enough to actually fight the royal guards for their land. She peeks out from behind Alma and says this land looks great, and the boy totally agrees with her. The guy spots the she-wolf and totally freaks out, but Fenrir just asks if he's a bit late to be scared, when really he's just losing it because she can actually. Alma grabs everyone's attention and announces that Felnet is in charge of the settlement while he's at the capital, and the she-wolf immediately bows to her new master. Fel leaps into action and raises his paw, shouting that he's officially on board with the Lord's orders too. Alma realizes he hasn't been forced to use this much mana since his previous life. Alma pulls up his system to check his skills, only to find out his mana is completely at 0. He still remembers every single stat from his previous life. He didn't actually level up that much right before he died. This guy can even recite his skill levels from memory. Alma spots something super weird on his skill screen, and realizes one of his powers totally reset to level 1, even though everything else looks exactly the same. Only one skill tanked back to level 1, and the guy hints that levels are way more than just a progress bar. His rebirth skill let him keep all his memories, and as soon as he hit adulthood, all his past life powers finally kicked in. Alma's wondering if his progress bar is actually carrying over, and even though he knows it's just a theory, there's a huge chance it's real. Alma stares at his hands and realizes he could totally level up, but he's not in any rush since he doesn't really need that power yet. Meanwhile, over in Femeria's capital city of Wilhelm, a massive crowd of warriors is swarming the castle's training grounds. Edward checked out the massive army, and was actually pretty hyped, asking General Achilles if bringing this many soldiers was total overkill for just one tiny territory. Achilles just laughs and calls his subordinate his prime minister, totally just messing around. Achilles says these warriors are basically just pack mules, since someone has to haul all the booze and cash to the capital. The guy tells Edward that Achilles is such a beast he could take over any land, even if he had to face 10,000 soldiers alone. Edward looks at the guy and realizes he isn't bluffing, because Achilles is the literal god of war, and the general who runs every single military move in the kingdom. Edward heard that Achilles totally soloed an entire rebel army just the other day, but there's some seriously shady talk going around about him too. Edward turns back to the guy and explains he's actually there with a message from Lord Julius, saying Achilles needs to put the brakes on that march to Frandal for now. The killer loses his cool and tells Julius he's hilarious for trying to say no, especially since his army is already geared up and ready to move out. Out of nowhere, a massive crack splits the wall right where Achilles and Edward are standing, and then the whole thing just comes crashing down. Edward saw the enemy blast right through the outer wall, and Achilles just stared at the new guys, asking who the heck they even were. A girl steps up and introduces herself as Luna, explaining she traveled all the way from Frandal to find the legendary sage Julius, before looking straight at Achilles and asking where the guy is. Luna asks what kind of letter she needs, and the knight tells her straight up that you can't see the great sage without an appointment or a recommendation letter. Luna is totally speechless, but the knights think they've got it all figured out, assuming she's just another one of Julius's massive fangirls. She realized she needed a different route, so she literally smashed through the wall to make her own path. The knights stared at the girl, wondering who she even was and why she was looking for the legendary sage Julius. Luna thrusts her hands forward and tells the knights to get out of the way if they want to survive, right before she unleashes a crazy powerful wind magic storm. Her magic blast sent a bunch of knights flying, and the ones left standing charged straight at her. She uses her magic again to vanish right in front of the knights, and while they're looking around confused, Luna suddenly pops up behind them and strikes. Achilles laughs and calls Luna a genius spy, then asks Edward if he wants to stick around and watch. The guy spun around when he heard a knight shout, only to see a fireball zooming straight for his face. Luna thought she totally missed and looked for the damage, but her jaw dropped when she saw the general grinning while easily swatting her attack away. She was totally blown away that he blocked her hit with his bare hands, and then Achilles stepped up and ordered all his knights to back off. She could tell right away he was on a totally different level, feeling a massive pressure like he was some legendary sage, but she realized the truth was actually way more terrifying. This massive dude towers over the girl and tells her to get lost right now, or he's seriously gonna wreck her. Achilles was just looking for some excitement to kill the boredom, but then someone distracts him, and the girl finally feels like she can catch her breath. One knight points out that Luna might be a kid, but she literally just smashed a whole wall, so since he's in a bad mood and refuses to fight children, he tells the others to handle it. The guy whips around when he hears her voice, and it's clear she's totally locked in. No matter how scary her opponent is, she's going to crush him because she has. She says sorry and dives back into the fight against Achilles, while the guy asks why she's so obsessed with Julius. Achilles caught her using magic without even saying a word, so he realized he'd better watch his back. Luna realizes her magic isn't even scratching the guy. She has no idea what he's actually capable of, so she backs off to stay safe. Then, she lets loose a wind cutter spell. The guy just smirks, thinking she's a total pushover, and says if she's that desperate to fight, he's more than happy to take her on. The guy chucks a massive boulder at her, but she just shuts her eyes and moves to a different spot, leaving him totally weirded out. Her eyes went wide as a ton of massive rocks came flying right at her. She tried to stay back, but Achilles caught up with a smirk, and she realized he was reading her every move. Every throw she made just brought her closer to losing. A flying rock almost crushed her, but she blocked it with a water shield and then totally wiped out the knights with a massive waterfall spell. She figured that no matter how strong Achilles was, the water would just sweep him away like it was nothing. Luna's jaw drops as she watches the guy use a blast of wind to send the water flying right back. Achilles chucks the pillar straight at the wall and walks over, asking the girl if she seriously thought she could hide in there. He points her right toward the front door and tells her to run for it while she still has the chance. She was dying to know what Achilles' gift actually did, and she figured it was probably just some kind of insane physical strength. She gestures to the side and tells him straight up that she brought him here on purpose. Out of nowhere, the palace gates slam down right on top of the guy, and everyone stares at him and Luna in total shock, because she definitely did that on purpose. He realized she wasn't just teleporting, she could actually move stuff with her mind too. Luna walked right up to the guy and asked where Julius was again, but Achilles just flashed a huge, creepy smile. Luna gets right in Achilles' face to demand where Julius is, and he's so ticked off that the veins are literally popping out of his head because he can't believe this girl's nerve. The guy is shocked that a kid like Luna knows so many spells and calls her lucky, but he actually can't stand people who are born with that much talent. The guy asks if she's seriously that hyped to meet the great sage, totally confused why she wasn't scared to go see Julius. Luna offers Julius a massive deal to trade his life for his father's, because she's ready to do whatever it takes to protect her people in Frandal. Achilles asks who her dad is, and then it hits him. Luna's father Eric is actually the ruler of Frandal. Right then, he remembers exactly what Edward told him about Frandal. Achilles bows his head and finally gets the full picture, realizing Julius delayed the whole mission because he's willing to do literally anything to level up. Achilles decides to switch things up, and the girl's eyes go wide as she watches his body transform, realizing this isn't even magic. He smashes the door, pinning him down, and smirks, saying that once he takes out this intruder, everything will be over in a flash. Achilles smashes the door into a million pieces and finally breaks free. Luna stared at Achilles in total disbelief because that door was solid steel, and she honestly thought it was impossible for any human to just break through it like that. Edward whips around and finds himself staring right at the god of war, Achilles. He realizes this guy has the Berserker gift, where mana stays locked inside his body to constantly supercharge his muscles and bones. Achilles was always the black sheep because his whole family are mages, and Edward was seriously stressing, wondering if Achilles would actually make it in time. The guy dropped into a battle stance and got ready to strike, looking like he was totally locked in. Luna knew right away she had to keep her distance. She warped super far away so the guy couldn't land a hit. The man realized she just used teleportation. He leaped into the air. Luna stared at the empty spot where the guy was just standing, totally shocked. The knights were also freaking out because he had completely vanished. They all figured Achilles must have used some kind of teleportation. Achilles suddenly teleports right behind Luna. He swings his weapon, ready to take her out. Luna's mind races as she tries to figure out what to do. She thinks about dodging. He takes a massive swing, but the moon just vanishes and he misses completely. The guy stared at the empty spot in total shock, thinking she must have just teleported away again. The guy looks back and sees Julius holding the girl, realizing he's the one who snatched her up and carried her to safety. She tried to speak, but she was totally speechless that the legendary sage Julius had actually stepped in to save her. Julius finally let the girl go. Julius says he got a message from Sir Edward, who's totally ticked off because he thinks Achilles is being a jerk to the girl. But Achilles just smirks and says the moon has already... Julius says Achilles' crazy accuracy is the reason everyone's so hurt. But the wild part is he wasn't even thinking about his aim during the battle. Julius says he'll pay for all the broken walls and damage himself, tricks everyone into calling the whole mess a training accident, and demands they bring all the hurt soldiers straight to him. They ask Julius if anyone else is going to come forward with more charges against him. Achilles gives the guy a death stare, then just turns around and says he's got no beef. He's out of here. Luna watched the guy walk away. Then Julius turned and told her to follow him so they could talk in private, and they both headed straight into the office. Julius asks if she really just wants Lord Eric set free and back in charge of Frandal, and then he just starts laughing. Luna looks at the guy and remembers that Julius is the strongest mage in the kingdom and a totally heartless prime minister. She's freaking out over what he's going to force her. She's already made up her mind that she's saving her dad. She's down to do whatever it takes, even if it means breaking the law. Julius just asks if she really... Luna panics, wondering if she accidentally blurted that out. She quickly slaps her hand over her mouth. Julius tells her to chill out and stop being so terrified. He promises that He repeats that he doesn't care about the moon at all, leaving the girl totally stunned. Julius tells Luna he's totally hooked on her talent, and as her eyes go wide with shock, she asks why a guy like him would ever need her help. Julius lays out exactly what he wants, and the girl's jaw drops when she hears his crazy demands. Achilles is totally caught off guard and asks Julius to repeat what he just said. This guy straight up says that Luna is going to be his wife. The guy announces the war on Frandal is totally over, and he's sending Lord Eric back to rule as a royal. But Achilles snaps back that he didn't even ask about that. He says it one more time. They're totally going to be husband and wife. Achilles thinks Julius is just messing around, but the look on his face is dead serious. Luna just looks down at the floor and stays completely quiet. Luna was totally terrified the moment she heard Julius was going to make her his wife. Luna can already hear her sister yelling at her for hanging out with sketchy people and being reckless in the city. But the man tells her she's got it all wrong. He makes it clear again that he's not into her, just her power, and says the marriage is only happening so he can keep her insane talent for himself. Luna asks if this is seriously why Julia kidnapped her own dad and is keeping everyone in Frandal terrified. She's wondering why anyone would go through all that just for insane power. But Julius just stares at her without saying a single word. He totally ignores her and drops the news that the wedding is tomorrow, telling her it's late and she needs to follow him to her room right now. Luna is totally sure that Julius is hunting for the exact same power she used when she first met Fenrir. Edward saw Luna's annoyed face and told her there was no reason to be so mad. He totally got why she'd hate a forced marriage, but he reminded her he tells her that marrying the prime minister puts her way above every other noble, giving her a massive head start over everyone else. He says Luna will get to live the dream in the palace with fancy baths. Luna totally flipped the second she heard about those books on mania. She couldn't even hide how hyped she was. The guy saw right away that she was losing it with joy. Edward then... The girl stands there totally stunned before screaming about how this guy can be 60 when he looks exactly like her, especially since he's way too handsome for his age. Edward explains he did the... Luna is totally stunned by Edward's words and stares at him with huge eyes. The guy catches her staring and just grins, asking why she's giving him such a weird look. Edward explains that since Mr. Julius is obsessed with power, he has no idea what. Achilles snaps at Julius, telling him to stop talking like that. He reports that the army is hyped and ready for war. He's tired of waiting and thinks they've wasted. Achilles asks Julius if he has any clue how much of a headache he is for everyone around him. The big-shot sage claims this wedding is way better for the kingdom than any of the drama it causes. Achilles is like, "Are you for real right now?" He tells him it. Julius gets dead serious and says the decision is final, announcing that the ceremony kicks off in only a few hours. He hands him an envelope and says he's looking forward to seeing him join the action. Luna stares at Achilles with a worried look while he's absolutely fuming, veins popping out of his face. But Edward steps in and tells his master that now is definitely not the time. Luna's jaw drops as horns start sprouting from Achilles, who just laughs and says only Julius could pull off a move like that. Julius reveals that Achilles has this crazy berserker gift that stuffs mana inside his body to give him insane strength. But he's still got major flaws because he's totally unstable and his power levels are literally breaking the scale. He explains that while normal people naturally leak extra mana, Achilles keeps it all trapped inside, and that's why the god of war is totally losing it and blowing everything up right now. Achilles looks up, hearing a voice, and suddenly smashes the pillar next to him into pieces, totally freaking out Luna and Edward. Achilles keeps screaming, shouting that the voice in his head is demanding he fight someone to finally let out all his rage. The guy leaps up and throws a punch while dissing Julius, so Julius steps up to fight back. Edward says things are looking really bad, and he's terrified of the absolute chaos that'll happen if a legendary sage and a master martial artist actually go head-to-head. Luna's debating if she should save Julius, but she remembers he had her back before, and besides, their whole deal is toast without him. Julius crosses his arms and tells Luna he's got everything handled, so she needs to stay out of it. The guy stares Achilles down with a terrifying look, getting ready to unleash some insane magic from the world around them. A blinding flash of light explodes out of nowhere, and Luna and Edward scramble to shield their eyes. Luna hears a scream and wonders who's losing it, while people shout, trying to figure out what happened and where this new fighter came from. And suddenly Luna gets hit with a wave of helplessness. Luna recognizes Alma's voice, and he's just relieved he's familiar with her mana, because that's the only way he could teleport straight into the palace. Alma and Raoul pop up right in front of Achilles, who smacks the barrier and warns them that things are getting crazy back at the palace. Luna is seriously hyped to see Alma finally show up. Achilles grits his teeth as Alma turns to greet the girl, thinking about how long it's been since they last met. And while she starts blushing, Julius is right there giving Alma a total death stare. Almost was standing right in front of Julius, but the great sage threw up a barrier that totally blocked Achilles from landing a hit. Achilles was totally stumped on how Alma broke into the palace, thinking the kid teleported until he remembered the castle's huge barrier. But he quickly decided it didn't matter because Alma whips around and catches Achilles staring him down with pure hatred. He looks at Luna and tells her he's so relieved she's okay, especially since all the crazy rumors had him thinking the worst. Achilles lunges into the air and throws a massive punch, and even though the guy is totally frozen, his barrier blocks the hit. Luna screams at Alma to look out for the incoming attack. This dude realized right away that Achilles was packing some seriously scary strength. Luna looked at him with total hype and shouted his name, and Julius definitely heard her. He suddenly realized this was the mystery guy Edward told him about. Julius is watching the kid and notices he's not even fighting back. He's just straight up tanking every hit from Achilles. He's never seen a spell like this before. Achilles flashes a scary grin and asks Alma what he's gonna do when someone knocks the ground right out from under him. He slams his hand into the ground and it shatters, making Alma realize Achilles was actually trying to take out the support. Achilles tells him that if his magic wasn't blocking every single hit, he wouldn't even be able to breathe right now. He realizes the barrier only reacts to fast hits, so Achilles figures he can reach Alma if he just moves super slow. The guy lunges to grab Alma, but his eyes go wide when she actually manages to slip away. The guy hisses in total rage because Alma actually dodged and landed a hit, while Luna suddenly spots that Achilles' horns are completely gone. Julius noticed the auto-counterattack reacted to the guy, and when Achilles turned to ask what he wanted, the master magician just told him he needed to chill. Achilles flashes a huge grin and yells that there's no way he's chilling out since his hands are literally smoking, and when Julius tells him to read the room, Achilles fires back that Julius hangs his head and claims Alma is just a guest, but Hill thinks he's totally full of it and has a backup excuse for every single situation. Achilles is absolutely fuming now and decides to just bail on everyone. Achilles clicks his tongue in frustration, and as a knight checks on him, he tries to warn the general that pulling the army back is going to be a total disaster. He scratches his head and says one monster is fine, but he can't handle two at once, leaving the knight totally confused about what he even means. Achilles got a total chill from Alma, like he was watching Julius split into two right in front of him. He grips his hand tight and decides he's going to save the fight with Alma for another day. Julius walks right up to Alma to ask if he and Luna are actually close, and he even says sorry for acting like a total jerk earlier. He drops his name and reveals he's actually the kingdom's legendary great sage, and suddenly, everything finally clicks for Alma. He finally meets Julius after hearing all those crazy stories, and honestly, the guy isn't nearly as creepy as he expected. Julius asks Alma what her reason is for showing up at the kingdom. Alma bows and tells the great sage Julius he's there representing Frandl, apologizing for crashing the place with Raoul. He totally thought they were about to fight, but he decided it's better. Julius asks the boy if he's got anything to say, and Alma blurts out that Lord Eric was totally framed for starting that rebellion. Alma tries to convince the guy that the Lord and his people aren't actually looking for trouble. To prove he's for real, he offers up one of Farandole's legendary artifacts. Julius says there's no need for any of that. The kid's eyes go wide with shock. Julius steps closer and admits Alma's offer sounds pretty good. But he's already. Roll and Alma are totally floored by the news. Luna gets super embarrassed and looks away. Edward was hanging out in Eric's room. He announces that one of the most powerful guys in the kingdom is going to be his son-in-law. Raoul scrambled back up and raised his fist, screaming that Julius just swapped one hostage for another, and this marriage is totally fake. Julius shot the kid a terrifying look, making Raoul freak out and scramble to hide behind Alma. Julius says business marriages happen all the time, and as long as both people are down for it, it's a totally normal setup that follows every rule in the kingdom. Julius looks over at Luna to see if he nailed it, but she's totally lost and can barely get a word out. But then he catches sight of Alma and goes dead silent. Alma waits for her to say something, but Luna just looks down at the floor. She turns to Alma and Raoul, thanking them for coming all this way just to have her back. Luna tells everyone she's totally fine, explaining that marrying this big-shot sage is the only way to keep their lands safe. She figures that with the kingdom's help, they can... Luna looks down again and says she's totally fine as long as her friends are happy, but she stops herself before she can say anything else. Alma yelled for Luna to keep moving, but Julia jumped in and covered her with his cloak. Julius drags the girl away and announces the wedding is happening tomorrow, telling Alma and the crew they're invited as friends of the bride before having the servants lead Raoul and Alma to their guest room. Julius looks over at Luna and, figuring she's totally wiped out, tells her it's time to get some rest, so they head out while Alma just stands there watching them go. Fast forward a few hours, and Luna is just sitting on her bed, staring down the wedding dress right in front of her. She remembers saying she's only happy when her family is, and she realizes that's what her heart truly wants. She's left wondering why she even started to hesitate in the first place. She was busy overthinking her feelings for Alma when a sudden knock on the window caught her off guard. She whipped around and saw Alma, and she was totally shocked by how he looked. Raoul walks into the guest room and is totally blown away by how fancy it is, thinking it looks just like a royal palace and way better than any 5-star hotel, so he asks Alma if she agrees. Alma doesn't even flinch, but she still goes along with it. Suddenly, Raoul hears a knock and heads over to see who's showing up. The kid spotted Edward, and the man said he needed to talk to the adventurers in private. Alma walks right into Luna's room. She immediately asks him what he's doing there. Alma says he just had to see for himself if she was actually doing all right. Then, he just waits. Luna says her mind is totally made up since she thinks this is the only way to save her dad and her home. But Alma cuts her off and asks if she really believes there's no other way. He hands her a mysterious object, and when Luna realizes it's a glove, she asks him why she even needs it. Alma explains how Sir Edward showed up with a wild offer, remembering the moment the guy walked into their room and challenged him to a duel. He talked about this old kingdom tradition where anyone who hates a... Luna asks if Alma winning means Julius has to do whatever he says, and Alma confirms that's exactly the deal. Alma is basically 100% sure this is a total setup. He knew that glove was tied to some kind of magical oath. It's obvious Edward and Julius did their homework for this. She looked down, knowing that if Julius won, Randall was finished. But his power was so insane that Alma would be in serious trouble if she lost. And then Alma asked her what she thought about the whole mess. She looks up at the guy, giving him a totally confused look. Alma's been thinking about every possible way this could go. He knows she's only happy when her favorite people are doing good. But her friends and family won't be happy if... Alma tells Luna that if she's actually happy, he'll just drop the glove and walk away. But if she's miserable, he's ready to take her hand and jump straight into a duel. He reaches out his hand and promises to crush Julius, while the girl looks at Alma feeling totally embarrassed. Emma's begging Luna to finally trust him and say what she really wants, but she's so choked up with emotion that she can't even find the words. A few seconds later, she finally says sorry, and when he tries to comfort her, she shuts him down to admit she bailed before Alma even got back because she didn't think he could actually... Luna knows it sounds selfish, but seeing that guy's face again made her realize all she really wants is to be with Alma and the people she loves. She just wants everyone to make it back home together, and she's putting all her trust in Alma. As the girl starts sobbing, Alma pulls her into a hug with a smile. He manages to calm her down, promising her that everything is going to be totally fine. He's heard. He was so hyped that Luna finally found the guts to take a chance and believe in him. Now it was his turn to prove she made the right call. Alma promised right then and there that she stares at him totally confused before her face turns bright red, telling him that what he just said could be taken the totally wrong way. Achilles had been lurking on the roof, eavesdropping the whole time, and he couldn't help but smirk at everything he saw. He was totally confused why Alma was sneaking around the palace. Achilles is getting super hyped for this duel and wants to jump in himself. He thinks a 3-way fight would be a total blast since it's never happened before, and as long as Julius and Alma don't team up against him, everything will be perfect. He was totally distracted until a voice inside his head snaps him back, and with a smirk, he tells everyone he's already got a plan. Achilles just laughs, totally hyped to scream his lungs out, as he leaps off the roof and strolls away. Luna spots the guy looking back all suspicious and asks what's up, but Alma just tells her everything is totally fine. He knew Achilles was spying on them, but he felt the guy suddenly vanish. Alma stares out the window while Luna stands behind her, looking totally clueless about what's happening. He realizes he's only got 1 day left, so he starts gearing up for the massive fight ahead. He stood there in the palace hallway, constantly glancing over his shoulder to make sure no one was following him. He starts feeling all over the wall, hunting for a hidden door. He's 100% sure there's a secret path somewhere in this room. He pushes on a specific brick and... a path opens up right in front of him, and he just smirks as he heads inside. The path is totally blocked off now. While walking through the secret hallway, Alma remembers that 200 years ago when he first came to the capital, he actually built a hidden bunker right in this spot. He also remembers that this secret hideout was the exact place he was trying to find when he first started his journey. I used a ton of spatial magic to build this place, so now you can basically teleport to any part of the kingdom in an instant. He starts replaying his talk with Luna and remembers her mentioning some promise Julius made, and now he's dying to know what it actually was. Luna told him that Julius was training hard to keep a promise to the guy in that photo, and the boy just couldn't stop thinking about it. Luna asked if this info would help, and Elma said that to crush Julius, the boy had to study him first, so Luna just smiled and said he was really counting on him. Alma keeps heading down the secret hallway, thinking about how Julius is only chasing power because of a promise, and he figures that photo might finally show him what it is. Alma's the key to Julius finally keeping his word. He's hoping this path means they can settle everything peacefully. But he's also thinking about just kidnapping the person in that. He walks in and sees his old work, realizing that building random rooms whenever you feel like it is a total disaster. Back in his past life, he only cared about being fast and efficient, not making things look cool. Alma walks up to get a closer look, and the moment he touches the massive column, he realizes it's in way better shape than he ever expected. He figured he'd be totally buried in dust after 200 years, and looking around, he realizes it's been way too long since he was last here. It was a homemade butler golem, and seeing its face after 200 years, long after all his friends had passed away, really hit Alma with a massive wave of nostalgia. The kid pets the golem and says it's been a long 200 years since they last saw each other. He thanks the big guy for guarding the place while Alma was gone. But Alma had no clue why the golem didn't recognize him anymore. The monster swung a massive fist at his head, but Alma barely managed to dodge the hit. He was totally stunned. He figured the golem wouldn't know who he was since he'd been reincarnated. But Alma realizes the golem actually has his old body's data saved in its system. Suddenly, the golem starts smoking like crazy. Alma knows this smoke screen is a total nightmare that paralyzes, poisons, and causes hallucinations all at once. Since his auto barrier is useless against the mist, he has to quickly cast a spell. He suddenly remembered he'd stuffed 8 different sensors into the golem, covering everything from mana to heat. Alma realized this beast could track down anyone, even in the middle of that toxic. Elma ducks the golem's swing and slips behind it, noticing the acid it used is eating right through the wall, and he realizes that stuff is actually made of some super high-quality materials. He stood there wondering what to do next, knowing he could totally wreck this golem. But then he suddenly remembered his past life, and how he was actually the one who built it. Elma was looking all over for the golem when out of nowhere, a monster popped up behind him and attacked. The guy doesn't even have a second to move. He lets out a massive scream at the top of his lungs. Thinking the intruder is finally toast, the golem powers down his attack mode. Suddenly, Alma pops up right behind him, bragging that even though he was moving fast, he still managed to whip up a clone for every single species using those golem sensors. He places his hand on the golem to sync his biometrics, letting out a massive sigh of relief now that the update is finally finished. The golem starts freaking out, but Alma turns around and tells him to relax, taking all the heat for not predicting this in his past life. Elma spins around to face the golem, hoping the big guy keeps guarding the shelter just like he always has, and the monster just gives the kid a super happy look back. Elma's dying to show off the golem to Raoul or Luna. Suddenly, he starts getting hit with some major nostalgia. He remembers how the golem totally crashed during its first test run. Alma used this room as his main hub to dig up secrets and take control of everything. In the beginning, he only used it to track who was entering or leaving the shelter. But before long, he sits down and starts typing away to find Julius's room, figuring that if he can't spot a photo on the cameras, he'll just have to go hunt for it himself. The kid finally tracks down Julius's room, but looking at the cameras, Julius is nowhere to be found. He still can't see that photo anywhere. Alma starts wondering where the guy could. Out of nowhere, Alma hears footsteps, and he's totally shocked that anyone else actually knows about his secret hideout from his past life. It was Julius, and he was heading straight for the control room to figure out his next big move. Julius pushed deeper into the room to check on the castle, heading straight for the monitors to see what was going down. The guy glued his eyes to the camera feed of Alma and Raoul's room, and it looked like the guests were finally playing nice. Alma was ducked behind a wall, super relieved he heard those footsteps just in time, while the guy watching the footage was totally stuck on how Julius managed to break into the secret shelter. Alma used his magic to hide every single secret entrance. Still, he knew a pro like Julius would probably track them down anyway. He kept wondering where the guy was headed and what he was actually up. He was also super curious about what happened to the golem that was supposed to be guarding this place. That thing was meant to attack anyone who dared to enter the database. Alma wondered if Julius somehow managed. He spots the man heading straight for Alma's office, and remembers how he used to chill in there all the time reading magic books. He figured the guy was hunting for a book to give him an edge in the big fight. But Alma remembers he already stashed all the best books away in storage. Julius isn't. Julius stares at the photo and drops a name that Alma knows all too well. Alma is totally losing his mind because this shouldn't even be possible. He spent every single day of his life grinding and mastering his magic. Almost nobody even knows what his real name. Julius shouted out the name he used to go by. Alma was just chilling in his office when Julius, a dark-haired kid who'd survived a crazy Gallum attack, walked in with some food, making Alma apologize for totally nodding off. The kid tells the master he's leaving the food right there. He drops the bag of groceries on the table by the chair. For some reason, maybe just because he was bored, Alma starts. A bright flash goes off, making Julius scream in confusion, but Alma just walks over to the golem and pulls out a photo. He tells the kid it's a test sample and explains. Julius looks up and asks if he can keep the photo, and the guy lets him, even though he thinks it's super weird that it's totally colorless. But Julius just says he doesn't. Julius gripped the photo tight and swore he'd keep it safe forever. Julius just grinned, thinking back to that exact moment. He looked over and saw the dust had already reached his master's chair. Alma finally stepped out from his hiding spot. He noticed that the legendary sage Julius had actually tidied up the office he used in his past life. He gave his old chair a sad little pat, and Alma figured Julius must have made him some kind of promise. He wondered if it was his fault this evil prime minister was born to bully everyone. He kept thinking about what that promise from Julius could. Bright and early the next day, Luna stood outside the church in her wedding dress, knowing this was the exact spot where she and Julius were finally going to tie the knot. Julius meets up with Luna and tells her she looks awesome, but she just thanks him and says the wedding is totally cancelled. The man smirked and turned around the moment he felt Alma sneak up behind him. Alma looked the great sage right in the eye, held out his glove, and challenged him to a duel. Alma slammed the glove down and swore he'd do whatever the guy wanted if he lost, staring him right in the eyes as he realized just how crazy his promise really was. Alma bets that if he wins, the wedding is cancelled and Lord Frandl goes free, and Julius is totally down for the challenge. Alma and Julius finally reach the kingdom of Famiria's capital Colosseum, a massive arena surrounded by these giant, epic statues of warriors holding their weapons. Alma faced off against Julius with the priest right in the middle while everyone else backed away to watch the fight go down. Everyone was dying to know who this Alma guy was, why he was throwing down with the Prime Minister, and how fast the fight would actually end. Raoul forced a smile to look tough, but he was low-key freaking out being in enemy territory and his stomach was seriously killing him. Luna knew the guy had a point, but she was still dead certain that Alma wasn't going to lose. Luna grips her hand tight, thinking back to Alma's promise to win, while Raoul smiles just as a man's voice tells the villagers to head inside. He promised the crowd a reward for guessing how much Alma would lose, totally sure she wasn't making it out alive. Out of nowhere, a heavy bag of gold smacks the bookie right in the face. Raoul just went all in on Alma to take the win. Raoul just laughs and says Alma literally has. The priest gets everyone's attention and announces it's finally time for the duel that'll decide the fate of the married couple. The priest reveals that a guy named Alma actually stood up to Julius and Luna. He drops the rules for the win. You've got to make your opponent quit or beat them until they can't move. And while it's up to the fighters if things get lethal. Alma took a good look at Julius and realized he looked way too familiar. He just couldn't wrap his head around the fact that this was actually Julius. Right then, the priest announced that weapons were. The second theory is that Julius is just a clone, but that's probably not it since building a fake body strong enough to get past the golem's defense would take way too much time. The third theory is straight-up necromancy, and Alma thinks someone is actually using forbidden magic to control Julius's body like a puppet. Necromancers can work with basically any body, but he's totally confused why they're after Julius specifically, though Alma thinks they're just trying to sneak into his secret hideout. Alma realizes he's got to stay totally locked in and can't let anything distract him right now. The priest asks Julius if he'll give up the moon and follow Alma's rules if he loses, and Julius promises he will. The priest turns to Alma and asks him the exact same thing, so the kid looks Julius in the eye and says he swears. The priest shouts for the duel to begin. Alma lets loose his most insane fire spell, and Julius shuts him down with his strongest water magic. Julius's water lance and Alma's fire lance smashed into each other, and the massive explosion left Raoul, Edward, and Luna completely stunned. They threw up a massive barrier just to keep the crowd from getting hurt. Alma and Julius were darting all over the arena. Alma drops a fire meteor shower and Julius clashes back with his ultimate water storm, causing another massive explosion. To everyone watching, Julius and Alma looked totally even, making some people wonder if they were just imagining the whole thing. Alma realizes Julius was just testing him out, and it's clear the guy isn't even taking this fight seriously. Alma was seriously starting to worry if this would just cause him even more trouble. Julius just straight up licked it right in front of Alma. The dude instantly knew Alma was coming for him. She smashed the floor right out from under his feet. It looked like she was totally copying Achilles' legendary moves. But then he saw it was all. He spots the shards and his eyes go wide as he realizes Julius totally tricked him with an ice clone. Julius lunges in to land a massive hit. Alma barely dodges and leaps back to safety. Alma realizes a few strands of his hair actually got sliced off. Julius is shocked that a wizard. He leaps up and charges at the guy, shouting that Alma is getting way more interesting, while Alma just gets into a fighting stance and says he's flattered right, as the guy activates a massive bot. This guy lets his sword fly with a massive swing. This guy actually lands a bunch of solid hits on him. The man can't even move out of the way, so he just holds up his sword to block. But then Alma just snaps. Alma lands a massive hit and C's eye just explodes into shards. He realizes it's just another ice clone, and suddenly, a sharp blade is pressed right against his throat. He knew he was facing a legendary sage, so he wasn't surprised one bit. He explains how Julius used ice magic right at the start to scatter shards everywhere and hide his clone, then asks if he's finally got the whole plan figured out. Elma asks why he hasn't been hit yet, and Julius just tells her he's waiting for the right moment. He asks Alma why she baited him into coming to this exact spot. This guy is totally lost, but when he looks back, he notices the ground right under the man's feet is already starting to shatter. A massive worm suddenly popped up right next to him, and Julius realized it was actually summoned by magic. He totally wrecks that underground beast with just one punch. The guy turns to Alma with a smirk and admits that he's finally been caught. That guy was still standing right in front of Alma, and the kid couldn't figure out how Julius already knew he'd summoned a monster. Julius aimed his hand right at Alma and unleashed his ultimate ice move, the Ice Lotus spell. Suddenly, everything in the whole area just froze solid. Raoul and Muna were freaking out about Alma, but all they could see was a massive block of ice with Julius standing right next to it. Julius spins around and asks if the guy actually used the teleporter, but Alma was literally right above him the whole time. Julius warns that this magic is super dangerous, but if you keep your eyes peeled, it's not that scary, even if the guy is spamming sharp ice spikes at you. Alma stares the guy down. He realizes Julius has already predicted his every move. The guy decides to go all out with his strongest fire spell, the Scorching Heat. He even mixes in some lightning magic. Julius unleashes his God of Ice spell while Alma counters with God of Fire and Thunder, sending their massive powers crashing right into each other. Julius admits he knew things would go down like this the second Edward said the kid's name, revealing he knows all about Alma wandering around since his family kicked him out, which leaves Alma completely shocked. The guy remembers a ton of nightmares hitting Terrastale and a massive monster appearing in the mountains, and it turns out both happened exactly when the kid was passing through after being kicked out of Firuz. Julius used the kingdom's massive spy network to track Alma's every move, so now he knows exactly when the monster will show up and what the guy is gonna do next. The guy tries to freeze him solid, so Alma jumps back, but as he lands, he realizes ice is already creeping up his legs. Julius is hyped that Alma can stack high-level spells, but he knows those big moves take way too long to charge, making them easy to shut down if you just time it right. The guy brags that while Alma's barrier blocks his ice, it can't stop the freezing air from creeping in, and as she kicks the frost off her boots, he realizes Julius. Julius flies into the sky and shouts that it's time to end this, dropping a massive iceberg spell as Alma realizes he only took this fight because he was 100% sure he'd win. Julius asks what's up and tells Alma it's time to show his real secrets, wanting to see if the kid breaks before that massive ice block flat-out crushes him. Raoul totally loses it when he sees that massive ice block, screaming that since the arena is so small, Alma has zero chance of dodging if that thing hits him. Alma stands right under that massive ice block, knowing he's only got one shot to pull this off while he desperately tries to come up with a plan. Julius suddenly screams that he can become Alma's power too, leaving the kid totally confused about what that even means. Like Julius said, he already knows everything about Alma's history. He's betting that getting disowned by his family really messed the kid up. He figures Alma only came west to get stronger, and Julius has no clue how Alma's powers actually work, but he's not about to let a talent like that get away. He tells the kid to just give up and bow down, promising Alma that if he becomes his right-hand man, he'll be the second most powerful person in the entire kingdom. Raoul and Luna were super worried about the kid, while Julius just stood there waiting for Alma to finally speak up. He hung his head, thinking anyone who knew about his wild trip to the east would call him desperate, but they couldn't be more wrong. Alma looks up and thanks Julius for the offer, but he actually turns it down because he's totally happy with how things are right now. Alma shuts down Julius's offer instantly because all he cares about is traveling with Luna and Raoul, and Luna is just hyped that he chose their life in Frandl. Julius was seriously getting ticked off. Alma turns to the Great Sage and says he just remembered a secret spell that Julius has never even seen before. He leans in and says Julius actually knows something about this spell, but Julius is just standing there looking totally lost. Alma reaches out and the vault just spawns right in his palm, while Julius gives him a massive side-eye. Everyone in the crowd is staring, trying to guess what kind of crazy box this guy just whipped out. Julius realizes this is a magic vault, and figures Alma is grabbing an ancient weapon, which is totally allowed since the duel rules say enchanted gear is fair game. Julius thinks he's got this handled and says it looks pretty interesting, but the man tells him he can grab any weapon he wants because nothing is going to stop him. Alma's finally making a move with his magic by summoning a massive Gallum, and Julius is just standing there looking totally speechless. Suddenly, the Gallum takes a massive swing right at Julius's ice block, but he manages to dive out of the way just in time. Julius was totally weirded out seeing that golem in the arena and kept wondering where Alma even found it. He figured the guy must have broken into the secret room to steal it. But the real nightmare was that Julius couldn't even scratch the thing. Just as the golem swung its massive arm, Julius screamed for it to hold on. He desperately tried to tell the monster they weren't actually bad guys. The golem froze in its tracks. Out of nowhere, Alma pops up right behind Julius, tells him he's wide open, and just as Julius spins around, Alma reaches out and touches him. He blasts him with the light of purification, and the glow is so intense that Julius has to shield his eyes. Raoul's yelling to find out what's happening, but he's totally blinded by that insane flash of light. Out of nowhere, Julius's mask just drops straight to the ground. Everyone sees how annoyed he is as the guy asks Alma why he used purifying light, claiming an attack spell would have definitely landed. He was totally confused about why Alma was using magic to clear away those negative status effects. Alma says he just wanted to see if Julius was actually in control of his own body, but the guy has absolutely no clue what he's talking about. Alma asks the guy if he seriously hasn't caught on yet. He asks Julius to spill who he thinks this guy actually is. The guy's eyes go wide as he stares in total shock. Julius is totally caught off guard and asks Alma to repeat himself, wondering how this random kid even knows his real name. Alma asks if the guy is seriously still this clueless. Julius stares at him, his face frozen in total shock. Julius let out a sigh as everything finally clicked, realizing exactly how Alma knew his old name, and that he'd definitely stolen his powers to hijack the golem. He says the kid even swiped his master's books, magic and research. Alma's totally confused about why he failed. Even in his old life, he never ran into another person who'd been reincarnated. It's such a crazy rare gift to have. Besides, Julius clenches his fist, finally ending a 200-year search for the master he's been dying to see. He's absolutely fuming and says there's no way he's letting this slide, especially since Alma had the nerve to steal his master's name. Alma just keeps her eyes locked on Julius. The golem starts stomping toward Luna and Raoul, but Raoul is totally lost because he can't hear a word Alma and Julius are saying, while Luna can tell the Great Sage looks really sad. Elma asks why Julius is so obsessed with her master, wondering if it's some kind of magic or if he's just after something special. He just couldn't wrap his head around why everyone was so obsessed with a guy who's been dead for 200 years. Julius snaps at Alma to shut up, swearing his master is still alive because of a promise they made, and now the kid is dying to know what that secret could be. Julius finally breaks down exactly what went down that day. He finally pulled off some ice magic and made a snowflake, making his master realize he's a total natural who needs to focus strictly on that from now on. The guy saw the kid's weird expression and asked him what was going on. Julius looked up with a grin and said he wanted to learn that awesome magic the master showed him before. The guy thought it over and said the magic wasn't ready yet since Julius was still a total beginner. But the kid promised he'd level up and get way stronger. But then the guy says he's probably leaving soon, and Julius looks at him with a super worried face. The guy started spilling some crazy rumors he heard about the army in the east. He dropped the news that he's hitting the road next week. Hearing this absolutely crushed the kid. When it was finally time to leave, Julius stood in front of the man, looking totally heartbroken. The guy saw the kid looking totally bummed out and asked him to watch the room, which actually got Julius curious enough to look up. The guy tells him all the magic gear and books are his now, saying he can sell them to be rich for life or use them to get way stronger. Julius was absolutely hyped to finally get his hands on those magic tools and ancient research books. The guy warns him to watch his back because the war is headed straight for them, telling him he'll be totally safe as long as he stays inside the room. But he reminds him that the kid starts stressing over the war. But the man warns him that things are about to get really messy and asks if he can actually count on him. His eyes go wide as he swears to get it right, promising to guard this spot until his master finally comes back. The man flashed a big grin and patted the kid on the head to say thanks, promising they'd definitely meet again soon. Julius screams that his master is totally coming back just like he promised. That's why he's guarding this room and the whole kingdom with his life. He's ready to do whatever it... Alma didn't really care about that promise since he knew Julius was just being himself, and after taking him in on a total whim, he spent 200 years straight defending their spot just to keep that memory perfect. Emma was literally on the brink of death when he met Julius for the only time ever, and he died right then without ever getting to keep his promise. Alma opened her mouth trying to get a word in. Julius panicked and scooped the kid up, but he was totally stunned to see him sobbing and saying sorry over and over again. Alma drops a bombshell and tells Julius the guy he's looking for has been dead forever. He says the dude actually passed away 200 years ago. But Julius isn't having it and screams that... Julius begs the kid to stop, but Alma says he's actually super thankful to the goddess for his new gift. He finally got to see Julius again, giving him a real shot at fixing everything he messed up in the past. The guy stares at the kid in total shock, and even though he sees Alma is actually crying, he still can't wrap his head around what she said about his master's death. All eyes are on Julius as he reaches down to grab his mask off the floor. He says if Alma wants to keep up this act, Julius is totally down to play along. He slaps on his mask and vows to go all out with every single spell he's got. Julius folds his hands and unleashes his insane spatial magic. He traps everyone in a massive world of ice, and Alma is totally blown away by his insane power. Julius kicks back on his ice throne and tells Alma he's ready to test her, warning her that in this frozen space, even life itself freezes solid. He's waiting to see if she'll actually back down, but Alma is already starting to freeze solid. His feet were totally frozen solid in a thick layer of ice. Alma suddenly realizes he never even showed Julius the finished version of the ice prison. He's totally shocked that Julius copied the whole spell after seeing it just one time. This kid's talent is actually... Alma folds her hands and says it's finally time to make good on that promise. He's about to unleash a crazy spatial magic spell called Vision carved in ice. The whole crowd stared up at this massive mountain of ice that was literally taller than the entire stadium. Raoul stood there totally confused about what was even going on. Then, some really creepy... Alma drops her Vision carved in ice spell, and as Julius scans the area, he tries to wrap his head around what she just did, figuring it's probably just some kind of ice. Julius was completely stuck and couldn't even use his magic, while all the ice shards in the arena just hung there, frozen solid in midair. Elma breaks it down and explains that every single thing in existence is actually filled with these tiny particles called the element of time. Alma explains that speeding up these particles makes time fly while slowing them down makes it crawl, and once he forced them to a total standstill, time itself just completely froze. Alma explains that a vision carved in ice upgraded the prison from basic frostbite to literally freezing time, and Julius is losing his mind over it. Alma says Julius is such a natural with ice that he can literally feel the core of the frozen world, and Julius realizes only a true master could ever pull off magic this perfect. It's almost like he's finally showing Julius the same magic he wanted to use 200 years ago. He said sorry for making Julius wait, and the guy just started bawling his eyes out because he finally realized Alma was the same kind person who had saved him. The ice block gets totally wrecked, and the priest and the whole crowd are just staring in shock at what's going down. Raoul was dying to know who actually won the fight. Julius was just standing there right in the middle of everything. Luna looked at him looking totally worried. She couldn't stop thinking about, but then she sees Julius crash to the ground, and Alma is standing right there in front of him. Everyone in the crowd was totally losing their minds. The priest shouted that Alma won the whole thing. The crowd went absolutely wild with excitement. Everyone was dying to know who this Alma kid actually was. Nobody could believe that the legendary great sage. He hears Luna calling his name. She rushes over and pulls him into a big hug. He can't help but grin. She tells him she totally knew he'd pull it off. Raoul and Edward walked up, with Raoul rocking his usual grin and hands behind his head while Edward tried his best to hide a smile. Alma mentions the crowd was going wild, even though he was trying to keep a low profile. Edward points out that literally nobody thought Mr. Julius would actually lose. He adds that duels like this almost... The boy asks what Edward meant by stealing the bride, and Edward explains the duel was actually a protest to crash the forced marriage and take her away. Because she won, the law says she and Luna are officially married now. Luna and Alma are turning bright red from embarrassment while Raoul's jaw just hits the floor. Raoul asks Edward why they're just hearing about this now, but Edward brushes him off, saying he'll handle the ceremony prep so the girls don't have to worry. which is totally. Luna was totally dying of embarrassment hearing about the wedding with Alma, and the guy was just as shook that he actually had to get married. After the arena fight ended, Alma and Julius headed back to the office, where Julius sat right across from him and listened super closely to everything he said. They picked up right where they left off and just flashed a huge grin. Julius starts explaining what went down 200 years ago, and as he pulls off his mask, he reveals that a decade after Alma left, he had a crazy fight with a powerful mage named. He figures out the truth, and as the guy moves his hair out of the way, Alma sees that Julius's eyes have actually turned to stone. Julia warned that spamming too much magic actually wrecks your body's natural defenses. Julius explains that demons are talking monsters that look like humans, but they're way stronger, live way longer, and are totally heartless. He's heard they've been beefing with the goddess forever and are always picking fights with humans. The guy says that in a massive war 200 years ago, a hero supposedly wiped out most of the demons and even crushed their king. Julius comes face to face with the demon and his body starts turning into solid stone. While the monster turns around and admits he's shocked his whole squad got wiped out while he was just taking a quick nap. He spun around with a smirk and told them he's totally down to be the new king. Julius was in total shock that he was actually losing. Suddenly, he remembered the promise Alma made him. He wasn't about to lose, so he gathered every bit of strength he had left and swung his hand right at the demon. The demon spun around with a creepy, hungry grin. The guy called him out for being way too cocky. Then Julius jumped in out of nowhere and totally wrecked him. Julius is struggling with being half turned to stone, and he says his body is basically more rock than human right now. Julius snaps his mask back on and explains that those fossilized cells basically stop him from getting old, so even though his hair turned white, his body hasn't aged a single day. Alma finally figures out the secret of how Julius stayed alive for over 200 years. Julius had no idea when he'd finally turned to stone, and he warned it could happen literally any second. Julius notices Alma looking super down, so he apologizes and admits his big mouth caused this whole mess. Julius tries to have Alma's back, swearing he's not even mad about what happened to his body, and that it's actually kind of useful. The guy says his fingers are freezing cold, but he doesn't feel any pain when he bumps into people, and after he easily crushes some nuts, Alma calls him a total optimist. Julius reads that meeting Alma was his biggest win of all, and as he flashes a smile, she's just as hyped that they finally found each other. Julia tells him his life isn't nearly as rough as Alma's. He used to think being reborn was just something you read about in stories. He's sure the kid had. Most people think that when you die, your soul heads to the goddess to have its memories and sins deleted before you're born again. Alma couldn't stop thinking about how his reincarnation power. Julius asks what he's supposed to do, but the guy just stares back, totally clueless about what he's even talking about. Julius asks if he should use his old name or his new one, so the guy just sighs and says the old nickname is fine, but reminds him that he goes by Alma now. Julia tells Alma he'll go by whatever name she wants. Then he bows down and swears his life belongs to her now. The kid takes a sip of tea and complains there's way too much. Then he totally burns his tongue and yells that it's boiling hot. Julius suddenly gets super serious. Julius starts screaming for the court doctor to get to the office right now, and even though Alma tries to calm him down, he's not having it. When Edward asks if he should call, once the duel wrapped up, Luna and Raoul were ready to head back to Frandole, but Luna begged to stay because she wasn't done with the library yet, so Raoul grabs Alma's attention and points over at a fountain, but she isn't even shocked since they're literally everywhere. It's Raoul's first time in the capital, so Luna walks right up and leans on the guy's shoulder, so Alma asks if she's okay, but the girl just says sorry, and that she got a little dizzy. He leans in and presses his forehead right against Luna's. He checks her temperature and tells her it's actually pretty low. Luna gets totally flustered and bolts away while screaming. Once the duel was over, things got super awkward between him and Luna. He's stressing that she's onto his secret reincarnation, but she's actually just dying of embarrassment because she can't stop replaying her wedding with Alma in her head. Alma asks if she's sick, but then he realizes she's actually just leveling up way too fast for her body to handle, which explains why she's suddenly dealing with a. He pulls up the system and explains that this is all just part of the process. Then he notices that Luna actually hit level 5. Alma remembers that Luna's been taking on some seriously tough. Suddenly, Raoul grabs everyone's attention and starts acting all weird, asking them to say he feels bad for getting too strong, which makes Luna wonder what his deal is while Alma just calls him out for. Alma realized he was still stuck at level 1, and since it takes way more experience to rank up as you go, he knew he'd have to hunt down the deadliest monsters to get any real. He thought Fenrir and Julius were going to be a problem, but he actually crushed them without even trying. They were basically just low-level mobs to him. It usually takes a massive amount of XP to. Luna and Raoul suddenly interrupted them, and when Raoul asked what to do with their level-ups, Alma just told them to eat and get some sleep, which Raoul was super happy. Raoul flashes a fat bag of gold and brags about how much cash he just made, thinking back to a guy taking bets, while Luna asks if he really won all that from just betting on fights. Luna, Raoul, and Alma are hunting for a place to eat, but they can't find a single restaurant anywhere. Raoul thinks they're just missing the crowds, but then it hits him. This whole situation feels way too familiar. Alma realized this street looked way too familiar, remembering a restaurant just down the road he'd visited 200 years ago. Raoul was totally blown away that a restaurant was actually sitting in a place like this. He totally recognized the shop because the home-cooked food was fire, and the owner always hooked him up with massive portions. Alma picks out a place to eat and Raoul is totally down, but they end up at this super sketchy, broken-down house that somehow has an open sign out front. Alma stares at the house feeling totally unsure, already doubting he was even here 200 years ago. Alma, Luna, and Raoul walk into a restaurant. The whole place is completely empty. Raoul asks if this spot is even legit. Alma realizes the restaurant has really gone downhill lately. He remembers it. The guy gave Luna and Raoul a quick look before he finally started eating. Raoul and Luna take a bite and are totally shocked by how good the food actually tastes. Raoul said the food was simple but packed a ton of flavor. Alma was just stoked that his friends actually liked the meal. Luna was totally into the taste too. Alma finally relaxed when he saw that he was blown away that the food tasted exactly the same after 200 years. And he was honestly just hyped to see that some things never change. Raoul's totally on board with what Alma's saying. He looks over and asks what that weird-looking statue behind Alma is even supposed to be. Alma whips around to stare right at the statue. He spotted a statue that looked exactly like a cat. Raoul thought the cat looked like a straight-up monster. Luna totally disagreed and thought it was actually super cute. Alma felt like she'd definitely seen that figurine somewhere before, the waitress serving there. The owner says that 200 years ago, her great-grandpa founded this place and actually got a cat as a gift from a traveling magician. Alma realizes that a whole 200 years have already gone by. She keeps going and says that their meeting was actually super awesome. She explained how this magician literally collapsed right at the front door of their restaurant, so they asked him what the heck happened. He said he got so obsessed with those magic books that he actually forgot to eat for a whole week. Raoul and Luna were totally blown away, while Alma just stared at the floor, feeling super ashamed. Even though it happened 200 years ago, he's still feeling totally ashamed, and when Raoul says it reminds him of the moon, the girl screams that he's completely wrong. The owner explains that 200 years ago, the shop was totally broke, so her ancestor used the very last of their food to give a hungry magician a massive feast. The magician was totally shocked and couldn't believe this place was empty when the food was this good. He thought every single dish looked amazing. Alma suddenly remembered the whole story. The hostess explains that Raoul asked if people were showing up yet, and the owner told him the place was finally blowing up. She started tearing up as she explained that customers just stopped showing up, and since they weren't making any money anymore, she was sure her cooking was the reason why. Raoul and Luna totally freaked out. Raoul figured the restaurant was just in a bad spot. He explains that they only found the place by total accident. But the girl just keeps on. Suddenly, the artifact totally flipped and started doing the exact opposite. Raoul thinks there's no way this weird hermit actually has real dungeon loot, so he assumes the item is just junk, and the mage is a total scammer looking for a free dinner. Almas just smirked when Raoul called him a total liar. Then he apologized for the mess at the restaurant, but the owner begged them to stop talking trash about the magician. She wipes her eyes and says her great-grandpa was super thankful to this magician until his final breath, and he's the whole reason she decided to become a cook. The mistress finally gets what the leader is saying, and her eyes fill with pure determination. She tells the magician she'll be in his debt forever, no matter what happens next. The guy just stands. The hostess suddenly snaps back to life and apologizes for crying right in front of them. She promises to keep grinding her skills so the master magician won't be embarrassed by her cooking. Alma walks. Alma paused at the door to tell the hostess her food was incredible, saying the smell alone would hook anyone, and as she blushed, he promised they'd definitely be coming back for another round. Roll kicks back and says the food was actually fire, but while he's worried if the shop will ever be popular again, Alma tells him he's totally overthinking it. Out of nowhere, he hears people walking by talking about the insane smell coming from the restaurant. The whole squad headed over to that girl's restaurant. They started wondering just how long this place had even been open. They figured if the smell was this amazing, the food had to be absolute. Alma figured the artifact was way too boring to actually grab anyone's attention. She knew you need something special to keep people hooked, so she dropped a mana stone by the statue that's Alma was dying to hit up that restaurant again. He wanted to go right now instead of waiting 200 years, but Luna was totally lost and had no clue what he was talking about. Alma remembered the owner's promise to never stop training, and when Raul and Luna saw the boy freeze up, they ran back to ask what was going on. Alma just smiles and says everything's cool, but he's low-key stressing about whether Luna and Raul will still accept him once they find out he's the reincarnated one, making... Luna asks what happened to the guy, and Raul says Alma is acting totally different, which is honestly super weird. He gets totally serious, thinking it's crazy how the second he felt happy, he became terrified of losing it, making him wonder if this was even the kind of happiness he was looking for. Raul, Alma, and Luna head toward the palace, and Raul is totally stunned because Julius promised they'd stay at a hotel, but the place is actually closed for renovations. Edward gathered the whole squad and told them the construction was almost finished, so they just had to hang tight for a bit longer. Edward tells them Julius said there's no way they're letting Alma live in a total dump like this. Elma smirked and joked that the guy was totally going overboard again, while Luna realized the building was way bigger than her own house, and Raul actually thought it looked awesome. Luna, Raul, and Alma suddenly go dead silent. Then everyone starts losing it, yelling that the hotel just turned into a straight-up mansion. Edward walks right up to Mr. Julius and asks if he's actually going to Alma. He tells the guy to get on with the story, but the man notices Julius is looking super tense and totally lost in thought. Edward turns around and says it's no big deal, promising to fill her in when the time is right. Edward watches the guy closely, waiting for him to keep talking. Julius turns around and flashes a smile. He tells him straight up that he won't get in Alma's way anymore. Julius is ready to die to protect Mr. Alma's peace, especially since he's finally back with the man who took him in and taught him magic 200 years ago. Julius and Alma met up at a restaurant to talk. They got right into a serious conversation about a super weird illness. It's been a whole month since Alma chose to stay in the capital. Julius holds up a picture and explains that people are losing their goddess gifts, leaving behind a weird mark that Alma grabs to get a better look at. The kid realized this pattern meant everything was about to be lost. He thought about all the victims who caught this disease and had their powers ripped away. Alma heard that this creepy sickness wasn't her. Alma realizes he's seen this pattern before, and after thinking it over, he calls it out. This isn't a disease, it's a total curse. He tells him he's sticking around the capital for a bit anyway, so he's down to look into it. Julius is super relieved and says he'd really appreciate the help. Right then, a dark-haired girl stood on top of a hill, staring down at the city while the wind whistled past her. Alma leaned in to study the strange pattern on the paper, wondering what kind of freak sickness was wrecking the whole city, and he was ready to launch a massive investigation to uncover the truth behind this.